Post-Apocalyptic black technology battleship system. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 51 Zombie Dog. Chapter 51 Zombie Dog. There were 3 cars outside the door, 2 Jetus and 1 Xenia. They were all in tatters, and some even had blood on them, which fit the apocalyptic style very well. When Xia Bai came out, most of the people in the 3 cars also got off. The leader was a young man wearing earrings. He was sitting on the slightly sloping hood in front of Xia Bai's commercial vehicle, Battleship, playing something with his hands, holding a butterfly knife, chewing a piece of chewing gum luxuriously in his mouth. He squinted at Xia Bai, who came out of it. Xia Bai glanced briefly. There were 7 people. There was a fat young man in the corner holding a 95. As soon as Xia Bai came out, the man pointed the gun at him. He took a breath and said, "What are you?" The young man wearing earrings smiled and said, "Brother, I see you have been quite active here these 2 days." Xia Bai said, "What do you mean? It's not interesting." "That's right. I think your car is quite powerful. It's like running over zombies and hitting scrapped cars on the road for fun." "Ha, such an awesome business car. Is it modified?" Xia Bai lowered his eyes slightly, seemingly looking at the young man wearing earrings in front of him, but actually he was looking at the fat man holding the gun, and said, "I don't understand what you mean." "That's what Xia Bai said, but he basically knew the purpose of the other party's visit. He probably came to snatch it after seeing how useful his car was. These days, he has been hunting zombies outside. Although the location of his activities often changes, he has always been there. It is inevitable that he will become the target of other survivors. This is not the first time. This is normal and unavoidable. Xia Bai can't hide his battleship. In that case, what else does he need from the system? Use. However, with just a gun, isn't it a bit too small of oneself? Less than half a month has passed since the end of the world, and the military survivor base has been broadcasting its existence to the outside world. This place is not far from the survivors. Those who are active in this area are either looking for supplies from the base, or they are confident people and desperados who have no intention of being protected by the military. These people may have some real abilities, but in Xia Bai's place, they are not enough. Even if they have guns, they are picked up with few bullets, and their marksmanship is even more incompetent. Talking about it, Xia Bai met him once. The man shot first behind him. He fired 3 times, but missed even 1 shot. Therefore, Xia Bai was very calm at this moment. He was even looking at the cars of this group of people, thinking, if you grab a car, you can move at least half of the things in this warehouse. The young man wearing the earring seemed to feel that the situation was under his control, and sneered coolly, "Ha, are you a fool? I want to borrow your car for fun. I'll give you 2 choices. First, honestly give me the car key, and I will give you a collector's edition of the 5.8mm bullet of death. Second, we cut off both of your hands, and then take the car key from you. Look, what do you want?" Before Xia Bai could answer, his companions burst into laughter. Xia Bai exhaled and was about to speak when he heard a howl of ghosts and wolves coming from the warehouse behind. Hao Zuan rushed out of Kang Mei as if his but was on fire. When he saw Xia Bai, he shouted, "Boss, doggy." The man wearing earrings, "Ha, you still have accomplices. Okay, he soon couldn't speak anymore, because as Hao Zuan rushed out, a zombie dog whose hair was stained red with blood rushed out from inside. His eyes turned white, and he rushed towards everyone crazily. The young man wearing earrings was so frightened that he fell off the hood of Xia Bai's battleship. With quick eyes and quick hands, Xia Bai raised his hand and shot the zombie dog right in the torso. Its body was thrown away by the bullet, but it pounced directly on the nearest survivor like a normal person. The young man with the earrings and his men all changed their colors. The fat man with the 95 style gun suddenly opened his mouth and fired at random. He hit the zombie dog several times, but he didn't kill it. In a short time, the zombie dog was not killed. The zombie dog has knocked down a survivor and bit him in 1 bite. This dog was not big in size, but it was extremely ferocious. It was very difficult to hit it on the head. The scene became extremely chaotic and bloody for a while. However, Xia Bai pulled Hao Zhuang back quietly and got into his car silently. And over there, when the fat man carrying the Type 95 was bitten to death, the group finally became frightened. The man with the earring turned around and ran away. He got into a Jetta and started running. However, at this moment, Xia Bai's car rushed from the side, knocking his car away in one breath, and then reversed, forcing the other car that was started into the corner behind. The zombie dog heard the sound and lay down on Xia Bai's car window to gnaw fiercely. However, Xia Bai's battleship was made of a special material. This guy gnawed for a long time, but it didn't have any effect. And the young man wearing earrings over there, the person, ran out of the Jetta and limped away, but the zombie dog turned its head when he heard the sound, howled and pounced on it. After the young man was also knocked down, Xia Bai lowered the window. He raised his hand and fired 2 shots, killing the zombie dog. The young man's neck was bitten open. He struggled to stand up, pointed at Xia Bai, and made a heavy sound. Xia Bai said, "Brother, I know my stuff. My car is indeed more collision resistant than yours." The young man's body twitched slightly, then let out an inhuman howl, completely transformed into a zombie, and rushed directly towards this side. Of course, to Xia Bai, this kind of ordinary zombies are nothing more than energy points. Immediately afterwards, Xia Bai got out of the car and killed those who had turned into zombies and those who had not turned into zombies one by one. Xia Bai has no mercy towards such people. And there is no need to do so. Just as he said before, when he killed Huan Yichen, as long as there is a dispute, no matter who is weak, he will not hold back. He will only find it for himself troublesome, and this kind of people are a scourge. Just because Xia Bai's car is useful, they come to snatch it with the intention of killing people. I don't know how many people will die at the hands of this kind of people. Seeing Xia Bai kill all these people, Hao Zhuang from behind asked, "Where did this good and despicable person come from?" The young man wearing the earring was indeed a good person. They not only gave Xia Bai energy points, but also a car. He and Hao Zhuang were able to loot most of the warehouse. By the time they returned, it was already dusk. The number of survivors gathered in the city prison survivor base has gradually decreased recently, but the number of zombies has gradually increased. In a few days, it is said that the number of zombies has reached 20,000. The survivors who come in from outside are now under the military's control. Only under protection can one end to the survivor base, and the response plan that the military has been talking about has not yet been able to come up with. Although many survivors feel uneasy, the situation can only continue like this. Xia Bai knew that the military's scientific research center seemed to have been researching anti-zombie drugs, but with little success. In fact, according to the news Xia Bai heard in his previous life, such drugs were not developed in the end. The military's final response was to abandon this place and conduct a general retreat. And I don't know if it's a coincidence or not, but Baolan and the others were attacked by a group of hungry survivors today, trying to snatch supplies. However, they failed. Baolan's single survivor is enough for these ordinary people to drink a pot, and Lin Jiangan, the company commander in charge of Jiudang, had a surprisingly good relationship with Xia Bai and the others because of the cigarettes. So he came forward immediately. Now, no one dared to pay attention to them. Xia Bai even ate hot pot very arrogantly that night. He had just looted a supermarket and had too much material to store, so he stewed it all together. The beef produced by the battleship was also fragrant, and the survivors around him hated it. Xia Bai also gave the crying man in his room a bowl of leftover hot pot instant noodles. The crying man was so excited that he ate and cried at the same time. His crying was inexplicable, but it was extremely contagious. Even Xia Bai wanted to cry. The next day, Xia Bai heard that someone offered 2 plates of chocolate to buy his roommate from the crying man. Please collect it. Please vote for recommendation. Asking for all kinds of support. Dear book lovers, it's not easy to write a new book, so I hope you can support me. Chapter 52 Zombie Siege. Chapter 52 Zombie Siege. November 16th. Xia Bai spent nearly half a month, and the energy points he accumulated reached a terrifying 1,232 points. This means that he can finally upgrade to a 3rd level battleship. During this long period of time, Xia Bai was running out almost every day. As time went by, the risk of going out was getting bigger and bigger, because with the large gathering of survivors, zombies all over the city are moving in this direction. About a week ago, the military forces gathering survivors in Xia Bai also withdrew to the Bingcheng prison survivor base. That was also this week. They were the last group of survivors gathered into the Ice City prison survivor base point in the past 7 days. No new survivors have arrived. This is also normal. The number of survivors in Ice City is limited to begin with. The number of survivors who flock to this survivor base will eventually decrease from large to small, especially after all external military forces are withdrawn, and there are a large number of zombies surrounding the outer circle of the survivor base. The number has exceeded 30,000 a few days ago. Such a survivor base is like a big cake exuding a charming atmosphere to those sluggish zombies. Hundreds of zombies are gathering at every moment, and this scale of zombies is enough to scare away many survivors. However, after such a long buffer period, the defensive measures on the perimeter of the Ice City prison have been fully constructed, and a 4-meter high wall has even been built, which is enough to keep the zombies out. As time goes by, more and more zombies are coming from the Ice City. Now there are almost waves of zombies coming in. Coupled with the gradually cold weather, now alone survivors walking out alone are almost seeking death. It is even questionable whether they can break through the zombies surrounding the survivors base point at this moment. If you can stand on the wall of the Ice City prison survivor base and look out, all you can see is a black and endless sea of zombies. The large number of survivors gathered in Ice City prison are like a cake that constantly exudes a huge fragrance to these zombies, attracting them from all sides of the city. Fortunately, Xia Bai had foresight about this. He had accumulated 1,000 energy points before the zombies outside the Ice City prison survivor base formed a large-scale point. Xia Bai knew that the situation would get worse after winter. Under the current situation, water supply and power supply are a problem. Heating is even more of a problem, and the survivors cannot go out to find food, so they can only live on the food provided by the military. The food provided by the military is also limited. In the end, it can be distributed to the food for everyone can only become less and less, and the survivors in this survivor base at this moment, like Xia Bai, are only a few rich people who have no worries about eating and drinking. When the time comes, the situation will get worse. Of course, few people think about this now. Most people enjoy the safety and peace provided by the survivor base. Moreover, the military's scientific research institutions have also announced that they are developing viruses to fight zombies and fight against them. The troops from the outside have made contact, and it is only a matter of time before they are trapped here. At the same time, the military is also mobilizing survivors to dig underground shelters. However, Xia Bai knew that it was impossible to develop a serum that could restrain zombies, and even if they contacted external forces, it was impossible for anyone to come to their raid point. Now everyone is too busy to take care of themselves, and most of the military has suffered serious losses. Shengjing military region is separated from Bingcheng by an entire province. It is impossible for them to come to the northernmost point of China. Even if they come, it will be difficult for them to do anything. But facing the bad situation in the future, Xia Bai was prepared. At least nothing would happen to him. As for others, even if he wanted to, he couldn't. Xia Bai's current plan is to upgrade his battleship to level 3 before December. By then, he will have the real ability to take off. As long as there is enough energy, he can avoid confronting zombies to a certain extent. Confrontation can even avoid some of the most dangerous situations. However, the time required to upgrade from a 2nd level battleship to a 3rd level battleship is far longer than the time to upgrade from the 1st level to the 2nd level. It actually takes a full 39 hours to upgrade to 1 level. This is far beyond Xia Bai's imagination, and this means that when upgrading, Xia Bai needs to find a way to cover or hide his battleship because his warships adhere to the theory of special effects necessary for upgrades. The entire upgrade process is wrapped in light. Just imagine, when Xia Bai upgraded, the entire commercial vehicle was glowing. In the densely populated Ice City prison survivor base, this was simply telling others that there was a situation here. However, this is not difficult. Xia Bai found Yang Chengxi, and this guy directly found an empty truck for Xia Bai. In this way, Xia Bai could drive the commercial vehicle in and upgrade it directly. Therefore, on November 16th, Xia Bai got up early and went downstairs to wait for Yang Chengzi to drive the truck over. However, Yang Chengzi unexpectedly lost his chain today. He waited like this just to wait. At night. It is worth mentioning that today another wave of survivors poured in. With the firepower support of the military, they managed to break through the dense group of zombies surrounding the survivor base of Ice City Prison and came to the survivors in the base, and after passing the security inspection, it was placed not far from Building 9. Xia Bai was squatting on the steps downstairs of Building 9, watching the convoy of survivors drive by. At this moment, he suddenly turned his head and saw Yi Zhaoqi sitting next to Xia Bai. She also smiled when she saw that Xia Bai had seen it, handed over a piece of chocolate and said, "Sister Bai calls you to eat." The corner of Xia Bai's mouth twitched. "You are going to eat? Why don't you give me some chocolate, Yi?" Zhaoqi showed a sweet smile. Compared with other survivors, Xia Bai's life can be described as moist. Not only does he have rice every day, but he also eats some meat dishes from time to time. At that moment, Xia Bai also stood up and went upstairs to eat. What Xia Bai didn't expect was that while he was waiting for Yang Cheng's truck, he waited from morning until night when the sky completely darkened. But he didn't wait. Moreover, he didn't wait for Yang Cheng's car, but he waited for a huge accident. At 1824. On the 16th, a huge chaos suddenly broke out in the camp area on one side of the 9 buildings. The survivors fled in panic and people shouted in confusion, but the meanings were mostly the same. Zombies appear in the survivor base. When Xia Bai heard the news, his expression suddenly changed. Because he remembered clearly that in his previous life, he stayed in the Ice City Prison survivor base for such a long time. There were only zombies rushing in from the outside, but no zombies appeared among the survivors at all. And what he was sure of was that nothing should have happened on November 16th. Xia Bai suddenly realized that the history in his memory might have changed. Dear friends who like this book, please collect it and vote for it. It's not easy to write a new book, so I hope you can support it. Chapter 53 Zombies in the Base. Chapter 53 Zombies in the Base. The piercing siren instantly pierced the entire survivor base. The military sprang into action almost instantly. At that time, Fang Dongsheng and Hao Zuan were waiting for Yang Cheng's truck downstairs and witnessed the whole process with their own eyes. The military's speed of action and execution capabilities are extremely fast, without any slack, because everyone knows that if zombies appear in this extremely densely populated survivor base, once the situation cannot be controlled in time, it is very likely that zombies will emerge from within and infecting everyone in the entire base. Without the zombies from outside coming in, the Ice City Prison itself becomes a zombie survivor base. The alien zombie virus spreads extremely fast. Depending on the body's constitution, a living infected person will turn completely into a zombie in up to an hour, while a dead infected person will turn into a living zombie again within 2 to 10 minutes. Come over. Therefore, the spread of this virus is extremely fast. Fortunately, the military has been preparing for this and responded immediately, sealing off all Jiodong and its surrounding areas. The military troops drove directly to the center of the zombie outbreak. Heavy guns and the sound even overshadowed the piercing sirens. In less than 10 minutes from the time the zombies appeared to now, the military has begun to shrink the blockade and eliminate the zombies in less than 10 minutes. The number of zombies has already increased exponentially, including infected people who have not mutated. And there are even hundreds of them. There was chaos downstairs 9 buildings. Everyone realized that this zombie virus was probably brought by the group of survivors who just came in today. However, every batch of survivors who enter the Ice City Prison must undergo strict screening to confirm that there are no bites on their bodies and no pathogens in their bodies before they can be let in. How did the zombie virus get in? Xia Bai didn't know. But they were quite close to the origin of the zombie outbreak. Before the military team could clear them out, a zombie ran over crazily. It was actually a rather funny looking scene. A zombie was chasing after him, and the survivors in the crowd in front were screaming, pushing each other, and running away in a huff. This is also normal. Most of the survivors in the early days of the apocalypse, even those who escaped from the city, have little fighting ability. They are the kind of guys who rely entirely on running to escape. Such people usually run faster than rabbits when they see zombies. However, some people were running away, and of course some people were not afraid. Some survivors even held various weapons and planned to kill this zombie before it infected more survivors. However, before these survivors could take action, a heavy gunshot suddenly sounded from behind the crowd. With such a loud noise, the zombie was shot in the forehead and fell to the ground. All the survivors turned around and looked at where Xia Bai and Hao Zhuang were standing where the gunshots came from. However, this shot was not fired by Xia Bai, but by Hao Zhuang. In the past 10 days or so, under Xia Bai's urging, Hao Zhuang and the others have been working hard to learn how to shoot. Are you kidding me? In the apocalypse, not being able to shoot is no different than waiting to die. Xia Bai is definitely a good master. His own marksmanship is completely developed from scratch. He is very clear about the kind of troubles ordinary people may encounter in the process of learning guns. But now, Hao Zhuang's shot hit the target, which surprised Xia Bai. Hao Zhuang noticed the surprised look on the face of Mr. Xia Bai next to him and laughed twice, looking a little proud. And this zombie was just a small episode. The military's efficiency and execution ability were extremely high, and the situation was quickly controlled. The zombies were quickly killed, and the crisis was resolved. However, within the 9-building blockade area all survivors will have to undergo another security checkpoint. There were thousands of survivors 9 miles away, so the inspection took even more time. It took about 3 or 4 hours. When everything was over and everything calmed down, it was already early in the morning. Only then did Yang Chengxi arrive with his truck. In the past month, Yang Chengxi has also become a well-known material dealer in the Ice City prison survivor base through his powerful resource channels. Under normal circumstances, he no longer personally delivers goods, but what surprised Xia Bai was that he drove the truck today. Don't be surprised. Yang Chengxi leaned against the large truck behind him, lit a cigarette, and said with a smile, I'm mainly here to see if my old client is dead. If you are bitten to death by some zombie, I'm definitely the first person to lose. Xia Bai said, you don't have to think about this. I probably won't buy anything from you again in a short time. Oh. Listening to Xia Bai's words, Yang Chengxi didn't look surprised at all. He smiled and said, is it because the zombies are sieging the city and you can't go out, so you can't get supplies? Xia Bai nodded, indicating that the other party was right. Of course, most of Xia Bai's supplies for trading were made from battleships. However, the Ice City prison is now surrounded by zombies. If Xia Bai continues to bring out supplies, it will inevitably arouse suspicion. Therefore, he just decided to temporarily suspend the transaction, and, after nearly a month, the supplies Xia Bai purchased from Yang Chengxi were more than enough. Xia Bai got 4 of the Thunder 8 missiles alone. And I don't know how many other weapons resources there are. Yang Chengxi smiled and said, why do you feel that the future business will be very sluggish? Xia Bai shook his head and did not answer the question. Instead, he asked, do you know what happened today? Are you talking about that zombie? Yang Chengxi puffed out smoke and said, don't tell me. I do know a little bit, but this matter, I only care about the friendship between us 2 brothers, so I'll talk to you. Don't tell anyone afterward. Xia Bai narrowed his eyes. Yang Chengxi said, I heard someone said that someone mixed blood with the virus in the drink and brought it in. Xia Bai frowned. What's going on? Who did it? What's the point of him doing this? Put blood into drinks and bring it into the survivor base. He felt like he had heard of it somewhere. The devil knows what the point is. These days, people are going crazy, and that person is probably dead long ago. Although they are still investigating, but whether they can be found, oh, only God knows. Yang Chengxi said, you don't look very pretty. It's okay, we only drink and eat our own food. Who can harm us in this way? Please collect it. Please vote for recommendation. Dear book lovers, it is not easy to write a new book, so I hope you will support me. Chapter 54. Do you want to? Chapter 54. Do you think? When Xia Bai returned to his room, he was still thinking about what Yang Chengxi had said to him before. He remembered that he had indeed heard of the practice of mixing virus-carrying zombie blood into colored drinks and bringing it into the survivor base. That was in the second half of the previous life. probably in the second or third year of the apocalypse, when intelligent zombies first emerged. Even the most crazed survivors rarely dare to carry zombie blood or diseased corpses. If they are injured and accidentally come into contact with it, they may even be self-defeating and infect themselves. This is the stupidest thing to do. However, Xia Bai remembers clearly that at that time, he was still wandering around the marginal survivor bases in Liang provinces. At that time, he had heard about intelligent zombies trying to bring survivors in without them noticing. In the survivor base, zombies are generated among the survivors, and the entire army is annihilated without any defense. But that was 2 or 3 years after the end of the world. According to common sense, there are not even intelligent zombies now. How could this be done? So, is it some idiot survivor who wants to use this thing as a weapon to secretly kill other survivors and create chaos in a self-defeating way? Xia Bai felt vaguely uneasy. Because in his previous life, in his memory, at this point in time, the Ice City prison survivor base was absolutely safe. Even if there were any conflicts, they were small-scale conflicts between survivors. There were no such zombies at all time. Is it the butterfly effect of my own rebirth? However, since Xia Bai's rebirth, he has done nothing to significantly interfere with history and events. Although he has a system, his battleship is only at the 2nd level, and it is difficult to get into the air. Even if Xia Bai wants to do something, it is impossible. So how did he trigger the so-called butterfly effect? Xia Bai thought of the paradox of rebirth that he had read a long time ago. It said that once a reborn person is reborn, the real situation will not be like what is depicted in many novels and movies. No matter what he does, it will not cause future conflicts. Historical changes are just the opposite. As long as rebirth occurs, the butterfly effect has already occurred, and the wings have flapped. Some things in the future may still proceed step by step according to the original history, but changes are inevitable, and the impact will never be small. So is it possible that due to its own butterfly effect, intelligent zombies appeared 2 years in advance, which is why this viral drink infection incident occurred? One of the rules of survival in the doomsday is to always think about the worst possibility, so that when the situation changes, suddenly, there will be a possibility of survival. If there are really intelligent zombies, then the Ice City prison survivor base will no longer be indestructible, but will become precarious. The 5-meter high wall is still possible for ordinary zombies to break through, but for intelligent zombies, it is completely undefended. Xia Bai exhaled and stood up directly. With a huff, the crying man opposite him trembled in fright and shrank back into the darkness. Xia Bai ignored him, but opened the door and walked out. In fact, given Xia Bai's evil reputation among the survivors, it would be no problem if he wanted to occupy a room by himself. But Xia Bai himself felt that it was not necessary. He was not the kind of hypocritical person. Xia Bai originally thought about upgrading the battleship in 2 days, but thinking of the possible dangers, he decided to start upgrading tonight. Upgrading from a 2nd level battleship to a 3rd level battleship is an earth-shaking change, so it takes a full 39 hours, which is equivalent to a full day and a half. If danger is really likely to come at any time, the sooner the battleship is upgraded, the more leverage Xia Bai can have to mediate when facing danger. However, what Xia Bai didn't expect was that when he opened the door, he saw a tall woman standing in the darkness outside the door. It was Balan. In the back room, the crying man in the corner quietly opened his eyes and took a glance. He didn't know if he saw anything or if he misunderstood something. He just lifted his quilt and shrank in like a turtle. For the rest of my life, my body has shrunk towards the corner. She seemed to be hesitating to knock on the door, but Xia Bai opened the door himself, was stunned for a moment, and said, It's past 1 in the morning now. A widow knocks on her door. What is she doing? Xia Bai, what are you? Surprisingly, Balan seemed to be thinking wrongly. She opened her mouth and said, it's Xiaoki. She said you didn't seem very happy, so I wanted to come and take a look. Balan obviously wanted to say I want to come and see you, but when she said this, she also realized that something was wrong. Her face turned a little red, and she fell silent. That girl is still as sharp as ever. The corridor was too dark. Xia Bai was focused on upgrading the battleship. He didn't notice the abnormality in Balan's words. Instead, he exhaled and said, "Don't worry. I have nothing to do here. Thank you, Bai." Lang realized that Xia Bai didn't seem to notice the abnormality in her words and couldn't help but quietly breathed a sigh of relief in her heart. She glanced at Xia Bai and said with a little worry, "Is there really nothing wrong? Today's zombies after the incident, you did have something not quite right." Xia Bai smiled. "What's wrong with me? But you come here so late. Do you want to come to me to sacrifice yourself?" Before Bailan could respond, the door behind Xia Bai was pushed open with a bang, and the crying man rolled out. He glanced at the two of them and said, "It's cool outside. I'm going to sleep outside tonight." This guy is too self-conscious. Xia Bai and Bailan were both a little confused. The atmosphere instantly became quite awkward because of this guy's consciousness. The two of them looked at each other. For a moment, Bailan hesitated and said with a mosquito-like expression. The low voice said in a sleepwalking way, "That, do you think, when?" These words came out, Bailan reacted and quickly coughed, trying to change the subject point. However, Bailan's voice was too soft and Xia Bai didn't hear clearly what. Although he didn't hear the words clearly, Xia Bai noticed that Bailan's face was almost red to the ears. Bailan rarely showed such an expression. Xia Bai felt like he was a bad person. He said, "It's okay, I was just joking. You should go back quickly. I'll go down and take a look." With that said, Xia Bai left first. The situation was different now, so he planned to upgrade the battleship to level 3 first. Please collect it. Please vote for recommendation. Asking for all kinds of support. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 55 Explosion. Chapter 55 Explosion. At 6:32 on November 17th. The zombies north of the Bingcheng prison survivor base suddenly became manic. These zombies rushed towards the wall and swarmed in densely. For the 3rd Company Commander Du Zemming and his troops who were guarding here, it was not an unexpected situation. There are too many zombies surrounding the walls of Ice City Prison. Even the slightest movement, even the sound of something falling outside will cause these zombies to surge wildly. This is happening almost every moment. Therefore, as the zombies outside the Ice City Prison survivor base increase, the military forces mobilized to defend the outer wall area become more and more intensive. Even the government and the police are cooperating in defense. Correspondingly, the management inside Bingcheng Prison will be relatively lax. There is no way around it. Soldiers are not omnipotent. Du Zemming has dealt with the current restlessness of zombies countless times. Several soldiers opened fire instantly at the firepower point at the top of the wall. Several soldiers climbed onto the outer wall and began to throw down a large amount of accelerants and then dropped lighters. In an instant, the corpses below began to burn. The outer perimeter of the fence is made of high temperature resistant materials, so there is no need to worry about injuring the enemy by 1000 and damaging yourself by 800 in this way. The main reason why they burned the zombie corpses on the spot was because they were worried that the pile of corpses would give the zombies behind them a chance to scale the wall. Du Zemming also climbed onto the wall, squinting at the surging zombies and burning flames below. Even though they have faced countless attacks from zombies, they still cannot be careless. Once they are careless and zombies rush in, they will not know how many people will die, and no one can bear the responsibility. However, this time, although the zombie attack was fierce, it still seemed that it would not cause much damage to the survivor base. Du Zemming couldn't help but exhale slightly in his heart. However, at this moment, another wave of zombies rushed over like a tide. They were densely packed and more numerous than before. Everyone became slightly nervous. However, at this moment, a soldier suddenly screamed, "Extreme mutant, Du." Zemming looked over, and sure enough, he saw that about 100 meters away from the wall they were defending, there was a dark, inhuman creature, flying among the zombies, tearing apart the flesh and blood of the zombies. in an extremely bloody way, is rushing towards the wall point. But Du Zheming's color changed slightly, but he didn't panic much point. Although the wall outside the Bingcheng prison survivor base was built in a hurry, it was still built by professionals. Everyone knows the importance of the wall, and no corners were cut. The wall is 2 meters thick, and has a steel structure inside. Unless it is explosive, no matter how strong this extreme mutant is, it cannot be knocked away, but it may be able to jump over the wall and cause huge casualties to the company. Therefore, this monster must be dealt with as soon as possible. This is not the first time that the military has dealt with such extreme mutants. It has already established and implemented countermeasures. Du Zheming lowered his gun and scanned the battlefield for other possible threats. He picked up the walkie-talkie directly and said, "Seek heavy firepower support from the general headquarters." Du Zheming's eyes scanned the dense group of zombies. The zombies within an area of nearly 200 meters were surging like a wave, and their appearance was extremely terrifying. However, suddenly, he was horrified and saw a strange zombies point. The zombie stood in the middle of the surging zombie tide, at least 200 meters away from the wall. The surrounding zombies were rushing towards the wall. Only that zombie was motionless, with a relatively intact face. Looking towards the wall, he seemed to notice Du Zheming's gaze, and even showed a seemingly terrifying smile. This is Du Zheming felt an indescribable feeling of panic in his heart. For soldiers, panic means threat. Du Zheming raised the muzzle of his gun almost instantly. The distance of 200 meters is not too far, and he wants to kill the zombie immediately. However, at this moment, the wall under his feet suddenly shook violently, and a terrifying explosion suddenly occurred below the wall. Du Zheming became unsteady and almost fell off the wall. In fact, there was indeed a big explosion. The young soldiers were knocked off the wall by the sudden explosion. Some of them were lucky enough to fall to the back, while others fell into the crowd of zombies, and were instantly swallowed up by the surging zombies. It was as if they were torn into pieces and changed continuously. There is no chance of becoming a zombie. He will be eaten alive on the spot. Du Zheming changed his color and said angrily, "Did you use the wrong dose of accelerant? How many times have I told you not to fire randomly? Are you ordinary survivors?" However, the response was an even bigger explosion. The entire wall was shaking, and a large crater was blown out of the lower end of the wall. A soldier next to Du Zheming fell down. Du Zheming had quick eyes and quick hands and hurriedly pulled him back. However, at this time, Du Zheming looked towards the zombie group and suddenly realized what was going on. It wasn't that they made a mistake in the exchange of fire. It's a zombie. Among the large influx of zombies, some had various explosives tied to their bodies, and even entire barrels of gasoline were tied to their bodies. They were mixed in with a group of zombies that were running or crawling and struggling to stay. In the middle, they looked very inconspicuous, but it was these zombies that rushed over like crazy, rushed into the flames, and exploded instantly under the wall like a suicide bomb. Du Zheming roared, "Hit the zombies with something on them. Hurry!" However, this was of no help at all. There were too many, and too dense zombies. It was completely like zombies staring at zombies. It was impossible to tell which zombie had something hanging on it. The soldiers on the wall opened fire wildly, but explosions continued one after another. Although the support troops from the rear arrived quickly, they were still a step too late. With an earth-shattering noise, the wall on this side was blasted through. Du Zheming rushed down through the ruins and saw densely packed zombies rushing in the flickering firelight. At this moment, Du Zheming's face turned pale, and he only had one thought in his mind: it's over. At the same moment, Xia Bai, who was far away among the 9 buildings, was also looking here. However, from his angle, there were buildings blocking him, and he could not see anything. But when he heard the explosions one after another, he realized that something was wrong. Brothers who like this book, please support it, and vote for it. Chapter 56 The Dead Silence in the First Half of the Night. Chapter 56 The Dead Silence in the first half of the night. Gunshots rang out in the direction of the wall. The survivors in several buildings near that direction had already retreated to safe areas. The military's dispatch was unprecedentedly rapid. The news that a hole in the wall had been blown through spread like a rocket among the survivors. Some people claimed that some crazy doomsday lunatic had blown through the wall, while others claimed that it was a military error that caused this incident. a huge crisis, but no matter which version is said, it has already caused huge panic among the survivors. Although the military had already issued a notice to all survivor bases via radio, claiming that this accident would not cause greater casualties or impact, panic still spread among the crowd. The formerly noisy and huge Ice City prison survivor base was falling into deathly silence. People were surprisingly unanimous in keeping quiet, as if they were afraid that, if they spoke out, zombies would swarm from all directions and engulf them. Xia Bai was guarding his large truck. His battleship was undergoing a 2-3 conversion process in the sealed compartment of the truck, but among the densely populated survivors, the large truck itself was still too conspicuous. He was worried about an accident, so he squatted in the truck on the edge. Xia Bai lit a cigarette, his eyes swept around the crowd, and finally stopped on a military convoy not far away. That was Lin Yang's department. At present, although the situation ahead was tight, the troops responsible for the security of each area did not move. Instead, they surprisingly gathered within their jurisdiction to ensure that all survivors could see the presence of the military. This can be regarded as a reassurance in the current situation. If there is any big trouble among the survivors due to panic, it will be really troublesome. At this moment, a lean figure squeezed out of the crowd and walked towards Xia Bai. It was Chen Xiancheng, the master of Thunder Fighter. This guy was actually quite handsome, but he always had that unexplained, mean smile on his face, which made his temperament look very vulgar. He came to Xia Bai and said, "Boss, I heard Zhuangzi said you were looking for me." Xia Bai nodded and said, "I want to ask you something first, Chen." Xiancheng was stunned for a moment, and then said, "What's the matter, boss? Tell me, I will go through fire and water without hesitation." Xia Bai twitched the corners of his mouth and said, "This is a bit too exaggerated, Chen." Xiancheng touched the back of his head. "I'm used to spanking." Xia Bai glanced at this guy and said, "You're not nervous at all." Hearing this, Chen Xiancheng was slightly stunned and said, "Why are you nervous? The zombies are about to come in. Everyone is nervous to death. Do you still have the guts to fight with me here? Haha. The boss is not nervous. Why should I be nervous?" Xia Bai couldn't help but was speechless. He didn't know since when he had become the wind vane of these guys inexplicably. When he was nervous, everyone became nervous. When he was calm, no matter what the situation, everyone calmed down. It seemed that, as long as Xia Bai's expression remained unchanged, it wouldn't be a problem, even if the sky fell. Chen Xiancheng chuckled twice and said, "Boss, why are you looking for me?" Xia Bai glanced at him and said, "I want to give you permission. Did you enjoy driving the battleship last time?" Hearing such a sentence, Chen Xiancheng's wretched little eyes widened. On the 17th hour of the battleship upgrade, the Ice City prison survivor base was shrouded in endless darkness. There were no stars or moon in the sky, and heavy condensed smoke rose in the distance. The smell of gunpowder smoke even in the JIU building can also taste. The number of zombies gathered outside the Ice City prison is too huge. When a gap appears, these terrifying creatures flood in like a flood, mixed with a large number of extreme mutants. If the military cannot eliminate them all in one go, with a large enough buffer zone, this gap cannot be closed at all. The survivors in this survivor base are still in deathly silence. In the dark world, there are only whispers. The unprecedented power of fear at certain times is enough to keep everyone silent. At this moment, in the other direction from where the gunfire came, probably at the location of the wall, there was suddenly another earth-shaking loud noise, and the entire ground seemed to shake, and some survivors let out a brief gasp, shouting. Under the dim light of the night light, people looked around in panic, and every face looked surprisingly pale. The direction of the explosion was completely opposite to the location of the previous gap, and along with the explosion, intensive gunshots rang out from there. Xia Bai couldn't help but take a slight breath, but he remained silent. At this moment, although he had not been to the scene in person, he was basically certain that intelligent zombies might have really appeared. In other words, intelligent zombies may have appeared a long time ago. They also need to learn. From birth to being able to consciously and planned attacks on survivors. It would be impossible without this process. However, although intelligent zombies will not be attacked by other zombies, they are also unable to command ordinary zombies. When they attack the Ice City prison survivor base, they only use the huge amount of zombies that have already gathered here. And if there were no intelligent zombies in the early days of such a doomsday, with such a large survivor base, even if an accident happened, it would not be in such a situation. Xia Bai also had to admit that he had indeed miscalculated. He did not expect that intelligent zombies would appear so quickly in this life, and that the Ice City prison would face such a huge risk in such a short period of time. Once the Ice City prison is breached, and zombies pour in, this place will definitely become a hell on earth. Although there is a dead silence in the Ice City prison now, this is the tranquility before the storm. Xia Bai also felt a huge sense of crisis, but he knew better than anyone else that there was no truly safe place or absolutely safe time in the apocalypse. Therefore, facing the precarious situation of Bingcheng prison, he had nothing to lose and no hope. Kuogan, in the past month, he has collected a large amount of supplies through the stable environment of Bingcheng prison. Now even if Bingcheng prison is breached, as long as his battleship can reach level 3 in time, he and the people around him it will be absolutely safe. Most of his goals in coming to Ice City prison have been achieved. Panic was spreading among the crowd, and despite the efforts of military personnel to comfort them, the survivors remained as calm as possible. But at this moment, an acquaintance found Xia Bai quite unexpectedly. That is, Yang Chengzi. The arms dealer came to Xia Bai with 2 of his men, holding cigarettes carelessly. Xia Bai didn't expect this guy to come here at this moment. He was a little surprised and said, "What are you doing here, Yang?" Chengzi smiled, handed Xia Bai a cigarette, glanced at the large truck behind Xia Bai curiously, and said, "Nothing, I just wanted to come over and ask, do you have any plans in this situation?" Xia Bai shook his head and said, "What can be done? Trust the military. It's the early days of the end. I think no matter how ferocious these zombies are, they can't possibly break through the military's firepower, right, Yang?" Chengzi exhaled and said, That's right, but are you interested in following me?" Xia Bai was a little surprised and said, "What does this mean, Yang?" Chengzi smiled and said, "I think you are also a person. Do you want to hang out with me? I can't guarantee anything else, but this time, no matter how fierce the zombies are, I can guarantee that we 2 brothers will die." No, although Yang Chengzi didn't say what he could do, Xia Bai already understood. The absolutely safe way to escape now is, of course, to leave by helicopter. If he could be taken by Yang Chengzi in his previous life, that would be a beautiful thing that Xia Bai couldn't even imagine. But now, just because of the existence of the battleship, it is impossible for Xia Bai to abandon the battleship and follow this guy, nor can he follow the military for a long time. Now that the battleship is about to reach the 3rd level, its functions and size will increase, and Xia Bai has not been under the big tree of the military all the time. It's time to enjoy the cool air. Xia Bai just shook his head and said, "I'll forget it. I still have a few good people here waiting for me to eat. You can't take them away too, right? It's not easy to write a new book, brothers. Please collect it and vote for it." Chapter 57 Chaos. Chapter 57 Chaos. Yang Chengzi left. Although he felt sorry for Xia Bai's decision, he didn't say anything more. In his opinion, Xia Bai was indeed an extraordinary ordinary person. Although he was only a college student, in all aspects, it's even comparable to the real top special forces. And at midnight on the 17th, the first helicopter took off from the helipad of Bingcheng prison. As the first helicopter took off, followed by the second helicopter, and then, at the wall outside the Ice City prison survivor base, the 3rd explosion occurred, and the 3rd gap was blasted open, and the situation has developed to this point. The survivors who were immersed in boundless silence and panic finally broke out. The survivors shouted, and even started to riot, dissatisfied that some people could safely leave the Ice City prison by helicopter in advance under such circumstances, and this evacuation was a signal to everyone. Ice City prison, the survivor base, is doomed. The military forces that had been stationary and guarded the living areas of various survivors took action at this time. They moved to the inner circle to suppress the riots of survivors, while the military's radio broadcast was giving explanations. "Every survivor, please be patient. As you can see, the situation in Bingcheng prison is worrying, but you can rest assured that the current situation is still under our control. The military has not given up on you in Bingcheng prison. Meaning, what are being evacuated now are scientific researchers, dignitaries and related equipment. They carry a large amount of knowledge and research results related to zombies, so they are the first to evacuate them. But don't worry, everyone. When the evacuation of political dignitaries, scientific researchers and top technical personnel in various fields is completed, we will give priority to evacuating your children. The military will not retreat. The military will guard the Ice City prison with everyone. If Bingcheng prison has been confirmed to be safe, and we will still withdraw this group of people, and if Bingcheng prison fails to hold in the end, I assure you that the military will ensure the safety of everyone. I am Xia Bai, commander of the armored division. On behalf of the members of my unit, I would like to assure all survivors present that we will never abandon anyone. Unless all of us are killed, we will defend the survivors until the last moment. This broadcast was played repeatedly throughout the entire Ice City prison, and it seemed very sincere point, but the survivors became increasingly chaotic. A group of people even rushed to the helicopter pad, cursing and shouting through the iron fence. No one will believe what you say. The sky is falling. No one cares about ordinary people like us. It's all the officials who ran away first. We took their helicopter. We took their helicopter. Don't believe it, everyone. The military just wants to stabilize us and use us as human shields to escape and evacuate when the time comes. Everyone, calm down. The soldiers haven't retreated and the zombies haven't rushed in yet. We should calm down. Don't believe the military's nonsense. Didn't they keep us waiting before? What are we waiting for now? All the senior officials fled in helicopters, leaving us here to die. People from the Zhejiang group can follow the helicopter. Why can't we? Is it because we are ordinary people? The scene is becoming more and more chaotic. Some people are shouting to attack military and government offices and tarmacs, while some survivors simply take advantage of the chaos to grab other people's things, and some are even taking advantage of the chaos to kill people. And along with such chaos, the loud explosions that rang out and trembled around the Ice City prison became less conspicuous. However, the chaos has not reached an uncontrollable situation. The military and police forces are doing their best to calm the emotions of the survivors. Of course, their number is small and what they can do is limited. They just need to ensure that the situation here will not affect the situation ahead. It is enough to have an impact on the battlefield. Xia Bai had always been very calm. He directly used the short-range walkie-talkie to call Bailan and the others to come down and gather all the supplies and people. In the chaos, there were even people trying to snatch the large truck behind him. That person obviously thought that Xia Bai's car was filled with supplies. After all, after killing Huang Yichan and escaping unharmed, Xia Bai was well known in this area. And many people knew it. Xia Bai was one of those people with the background and resources. Normally no one would dare to challenge him, but as soon as the chaos broke out, someone started to take action. The leader was a strong man with stubble on his face, shouting at a group of people to grab Xia Bai's battleship. Everyone on the Jiang side knew that Xia Bai and his group held a large amount of supplies in their hands. In the past, they did not dare to take action, but now they had the courage. Under the leadership of the leader, they rushed up with shouts and shouts. There are still many people waiting and watching on both sides. As long as these people have their hands, they will undoubtedly join the robbery trend. Xia Bai knew this, but before he could take action, Bailan took action. This girl came out from the back of the car carrying a baseball bat with a sullen face and hit her head with a stick. The bearded man only thought Bailan was a cute girl and even reached out to grab the baseball bat in Bailan's hand. But is the power of the awakened one a joke? With a click, the man's hand was broken. Bailan was also unambiguous. She showed surprisingly ruthlessness at this moment, and then she hit the man on the head with a stick. The man with the stubble flew up and hit the ground hard. His body was covered in blood, and his body was twitching involuntarily. Bailan simply flicked the baseball bat in his hand and looked at the other people on both sides. At this time, another person rushed up with gritted teeth. In the eyes of these people, it seemed that it was much easier to snatch supplies from the hands of similar people than to find supplies in the wild. However, this person was knocked down by Bailan without exception. As an awakened person, her strength was astonishing. Over the past few days, Xia Bai had been gradually teaching her various physical skills, and she was also grow up quickly. But this time, Bailan still didn't hold back her hand, and the baseball bat in her hand began to flow with blood. The survivors who had just been encouraged to rush up finally became slightly frightened. At this time, another voice sounded from the other side, "Come and grab supplies." Not knowing that the rich family in the survivor base had been robbed, the group of people headed that way again. Bailan was slightly relieved, looked at Xia Bai here, and smiled slightly. To Xia Bai, this was just an insignificant episode. Perhaps because of the current chaos, few people noticed that heavy gunshots began to be heard from several directions outside the Bingcheng prison survivor base. This means that the zombies may have opened more than one gap. Xia Bai hoped that the army could sustain it for a longer time because his warship had not yet been upgraded at this moment. In such a dense crowd of survivors, it was unrealistic to drive a truck to pull the warship out, even if he ran over people without hesitation. Moving forward, the speed cannot be increased. Therefore, he must stick to this place and this truck until the upgrade of the battleship is completed. And because of this, Xia Bai had no other choice. In the chaos inside the survivor base, he could squat here very calmly and wait for the passage of time. Helicopters gradually took off, and gunfire rang out throughout the outer circle of Ice City prison, but there were still no zombies rushing to the survivors. This meant that the military was really trying to fight against the zombies, and coupled with the joint suppression by the military and police on the survivors' side, the situation finally became a little better, and most people finally began to calm down. However, the attitude of the survivors towards the military has plummeted. This is of course because the military first withdrew senior officials and researchers in the apocalypse. The retreat priority of senior management and scientific researchers is often hated and intolerable by many survivors. Xia Bai was once an ordinary survivor, and he once cursed this unfair treatment. Is the life of ordinary people even more valuable? However, after 5 years of surviving in the apocalypse, Xia Bai no longer has such naive ideas. Although the people who evacuated first are definitely related to the existence of relatives, most of them are really capable senior executives and scientific researchers. Looking at the overall situation, their survival is indeed more meaningful than ordinary people who can't even fire a gun and evacuate first. This is unfair to the individual, but for the overall situation, it is the best option. However, Xia Bai never wanted to be a follower of the military, and he didn't care if he could be the first to evacuate. Xia Bai jumped off the roof of his large truck and was about to go up to him when he heard a very polite and tentative voice coming from behind him. "Mr. Xia, it's not easy to write a new book, so I hope all you book lovers will vote for it and give it a lot of support. Thank you for herbal tea." Chapter 58 Invitation from the Mutual Rescue Society. Chapter 58 Invitation to the Mutual Rescue Society. Xia Bai turned around and saw a group of people separated from the crowd and came to him. The first person was a middle-aged man wearing a blue coat with a cross around his neck. He looked quite kind. He stood in front of Xia Bai and smiled before saying, "Hello, Mr. Xia. I'm Huo Hansheng, the president of the Mutual Rescue Association." Mutual Rescue Club? What the hell? Xia Bai frowned, looking back on his memories from the past two lives. He couldn't remember that he had ever seen such a person, let alone heard of such a mutual rescue group. Changes have indeed occurred silently. Part of what is happening now can be matched with Xia Bai's memory, but some of it is beyond Xia Bai's memory. And at this moment, a middle-aged woman suddenly squeezed out from the group of people following Huo Hansheng. She came forward very excitedly, held Xia Bai's hands, and said, "Young man, do you still remember me?" "Really? About half a month ago, I was trapped in a supermarket, and you saved me and us." Xia Bai then remembered that this middle-aged woman was a survivor he rescued in a supermarket surrounded by zombies when he went out to hunt zombies for the second time. He didn't expect that the other party actually survived in the end and even arrived at the Ice City prison survivor base safely. He nodded to the lady, turned to Huo Hongsheng and said, "Were you also a survivor in the supermarket at that time?" Huo Hongsheng shook his head. "No, but I'm just an ordinary survivor." Xia Bai looked at the middle-aged man in front of him and the group of people following him. They were old and young, and they seemed to be members of some mutual rescue club. Huo Hongsheng said, "Mister, it has gradually become bigger, but it is still an organization of bottom survivors. It is normal for Mr. Xia not to know about it. Originally, we did not want to expand or do anything extraordinary, let alone disturb Mr. You have also seen the situation. Although the military is doing its best, it may not be able to protect all of us. Therefore, we intend to stand up and help more people. Although we survivors are just ordinary people, in the end, we and the soldiers they are all human beings made of flesh and blood, and the number of survivors gathered here is nearly 30,000, far more than the number of the military. If we can unite and even save ourselves instead of sitting back and waiting to die, I think we can face a better the result of." Huo Hongsheng said a lot, and he seemed very polite to Xia Bai. This mutual rescue club seems to be a large-scale organization among ordinary survivors in the Ice City prison survivor base. However, this is an organization of bottom-level survivors. Xia Bai has already separated from the bottom-level survivors in this life. It is normal for you to have no contact or even heard of it. At this moment, Bailan, who had already arrived at Xia Bai's side, came closer and whispered in Xia Bai's ear, "I have heard of this organization, and its reputation among survivors is pretty good." They came to Xia Bai at almost the same time as Huo Hongsheng and the others, but because of the appearance of the group of people from the Mutual Rescue Association, Bailan and others were cautious and did not speak. Xia Bai nodded and said, "Then what you mean by looking for me is?" Huo Hongsheng rubbed his hands, looking a little embarrassed. "Mr. Xia, we have heard about you. You have entered the Bingcheng prison survivor base long ago, but you often go out to rescue survivors. We rescue each other. Many people in the meeting were saved by you." After he said this, the aunt nodded her head. It could be seen that she was really grateful to Xia Bai. Yes, the young man is really a good person. If you have the ability, you don't forget to help others. Xia Bai couldn't help but touch his nose. He thought to himself, why did he go out to save people? Hunting zombies is real. Saving people is just a casual thing you see on the roadside. However, Xia Bai didn't say anything. He knew clearly that Huo Hongsheng was trying to say good things first. The other party who came to the door and was so polite must have something to ask for. Huo Hongsheng took a breath and said, "So, after we discussed it, we planned to come to Mr. Xia in hope that Mr. Xia could join our Mutual Rescue Association. You see, although we want to help the military, many people respond to us. We are willing to contribute, but most of us are really ordinary people. If we really encounter zombies, without an amazing person like Mr. increase the number of zombies." When this guy talked about this level, Xia Bai finally understood. Is this guy here to increase his fighting power by co-writing? Seeing Xia Bai's expression was different, Huo Hongsheng hurriedly said, "As a reward, we are willing to pay Mr. Xia supplies. Although we are all destitute survivors, there are many of us. Mr. Rai can definitely get it for Mr. Xia, and our side is not completely devoid of fighting power. We have already recruited several survivors to be armed." Xia Bai interrupted, "What should I do? It is not impossible to assist the military. After all, his own warships are being upgraded. The longer the military can resist the zombies, the better it will be for Xia Bai." When Huo Hongsheng heard Xia Bai's words, he thought it was Xia Bai who was tempted, so he said excitedly, "We have reached a certain combat plan with the military. The people we sent will provide support in the rear. Once someone appears somewhere in this situation, our people temporarily stepped in to ensure that zombies would not rush into the survivor base in large numbers." Xia Bai frowned and said, "The military wants you to be a reserve army." Huo Hongsheng nodded and said, "The military is in a tight situation, so the current situation of the military seems to be more severe than Xia Bai imagined." Xia Bai is located at the center of the Bingcheng prison survivor base. From his current position, he has no idea what the situation is on the periphery. What kind of situation is it, and how many gaps have the zombies opened on the periphery of the Ice City prison survivor base? However, at this moment, listening to Huo Hongsheng in front of him, the situation is obviously worse than Xia Bai imagined. The military is in a tight situation across the board, otherwise it is impossible to really let the survivors' forces prepare weapons for filling their holes on the defensive line point on the zombie side. There are also intelligent zombies in Xia Bai's opinion. The possibility of defending the Bingcheng prison survivor base is not high, but Xia Bai can't say this now. Even if he says it, no one will believe it. He learned from the past at the gas station point. Thank you for listening to the Cold Wind Wanshang, the first helmsman of this book. Thank you very much. I will update it tonight. Point then. Continue to ask for favorites, recommendation votes, and all kinds of support. Thank you everyone. Chapter 59 Zombies are coming in. Chapter 59 The zombies are coming in. Facing Huo Hongsheng in front of him, Xia Bai shook his head after a moment of silence and said, I refuse. In Xia Bai's opinion, the risk of going to plug the gap is too great. With the existence of intelligent zombies, plus zombies and extreme mutants, that are completely human seed tactics, even if he goes, it won't be too big for one person and one gun. It is even more impossible for the precarious Ice City prison survivor base to hold on, and the most important thing is that his battleship cannot move now. He can't drive a truck to pull the battleship to stop the zombies. That would be losing his mind. If the battleship is left here, as soon as they leave, there will definitely be other survivors behind who have been jealous of Xia Bai and the others for a long time. They will attack the truck. Once the upgrade process is interrupted, it will be really troublesome. Xia Bai is running to join the war now. Why not ensure the stability and safety of the battleship here? When the upgrade of the battleship is completed, the firepower possessed by the battleship will be beyond what he can match with a single shot of a gun. Therefore, staying here is undoubtedly the best choice for Xia Bai. But the reason for this cannot be said now. Huo Hongsheng was stunned for a moment. Xia Bai immediately said, I will not join your mutual rescue group, nor do I want to help the military to plug any gaps. But if you fall, and zombies pour in, I will be here. If you retreat here, I will. It might help. I won't move a step here for the next 20 hours. 20 hours is the time left for Xia Bai's battleship to be upgraded. In response to Xia Bai's words, before Huo Hongsheng could say anything, a 1.9 meter tall man behind him took a step forward and said angrily, what do you mean? Do you think you are someone? You before wasn't it great when you were killing survivors? Even the military turned a blind eye to you. What now? Are you afraid of dealing with zombies? If you don't want to help, don't help. If you are afraid, tell us. Why should we retreat? You will help here. I don't need it. Xia Bai looked at him, not angry, but said, are you my relative or friend? No, right? On the contrary, we are strangers, and you will fall out with me, just because I don't fight with you. In this case, what obligation do I have to help someone like you? At this time, Huo Hongsheng also spoke. He pressed down on his companion, still looking very kind, and said, Xia Chen, Mr. Xia is right. No one has the obligation to save others, and any help is incredible mercy and kindness. Mercy, thank you Mr. Xia. If we fall and retreat here, I hope you can help us. Xia Bai was a little surprised by Huo Hongsheng's attitude, because he could see that the man in front of him was very sincere when he said these words. What he said was obviously his true thoughts. The strong man snorted coldly, but Huo Hongsheng's words seemed to be surprisingly useful. He spat on the ground. What a good person who goes around saving people. Bullshit. After these words, he turned his head directly, separated from the crowd, and walked out. Many people left angrily with him, but there were also some people who expressed their gratitude to Xia Bai. Even if Xia Bai refused their invitation and seemed cold and selfish, they still had a promise to Xia Bai that had not yet been fulfilled, which seems to be enough thanks for these people. But the lady tried to hold back those who left, defending Xia Bai over and over again. That young man is really a good person. When Huo Hongsheng and others turned around and left, the aunt also came to Xia Bai, held his hand tightly, and said, young man, you must have something to hide, right? It doesn't matter, I believe it. You are a good person, Xia Bai shook his head and said nothing. Point in this day and age, you can be a good person, but you can't always be a good person. Point. The people from the Mutual Rescue Association left quickly. According to Huo Hansheng, they still had more things to do. The survivors in the Bingcheng prison survivor base were all the targets they wanted to win over. In self-rescue under this situation, there must be many survivors who will be willing to help. Of course, there will also be many survivors who will choose to remain silent and stay where they are. Point. As time went by, the explosions and loud noises coming from the outer wall became more and more intensive. The military even began to use heavy weapons to clear out the zombies at the risk of affecting the wall. Suddenly, the sound of cannons rumbled, the sky gradually turned brighter from the endless darkness, and a line of white fish belly gradually emerged at the end of the sky. Point. At this moment, there are still 20 hours until the battleship upgrade is completed. Point. Xia Bai squatted on the top of the large truck again, while Bailan and others were busy below, checking weapons and so on. Point. But after a while, Yuzuki climbed up, sat down next to Xia Bai, tilted her head, and glanced at him, and said, "Brother, is he in a bad mood?" Xia Bai said, "Why are you in a bad mood, Yi?" Yuzuki said, "Because of what happened just now. Many people say that you are someone who only dares to be cruel to ordinary people, but dare not face zombies." Xia Bai rejected Huo Hansheng in public, and many people saw it. Although many people expressed understanding towards Xia Bai, there were also many people who were abusing him. In the eyes of some people, even if they did not participate in the battle themselves, Xia Bai was so powerful. People with a certain level of fighting ability should fight tooth and nail, no matter how much risk they take. Point. And once Xia Bai didn't fight for these people for no reason, these people would curse all kinds of things. Even though he was hiding, he seemed to be relying on his own weakness to be protected and abused. They have the same duty. Point. Moreover, what Yuzuki said was nice, but what those people said was even worse. Point. Xia Bai was not in a bad mood because of this kind of thing. Point. Moreover, Xia Bai went to work hard, but in turn, these sarcastic people robbed his car and interrupted the upgrade of the battleship, which was even more funny. Point. There is no need to pay attention to such people, but Xia Bai's promise to the people in the Mutual Rescue Association is true. Even if the strong man scolds him, he is still a courageous person. Although Huo Hansheng is gentle and polite, but he is indeed a good person, and the purpose of the Mutual Aid Society is correct. Point. In the apocalypse, you can't wait forever for others to save you. Point. If you want to evacuate from the Ice City prison survivor base, the military and the Mutual Rescue Association are the main forces. On the contrary, those who make sarcastic remarks everywhere are the ones who can really do nothing to help. Point. Xia Bai rubbed Yuzuki's head and said, "Why am I in a bad mood, Yi?" Yuzuki smiled and said, "Then you have been looking sad since yesterday." Xia Bai joked, "The zombies have rushed in. I'm afraid it won't be long before they are at our feet. Hao Zhuang and the others are waiting for me to come up with ideas. How can I not look sad, Yi?" Yuzuki flattened her mouth and was about to say something. Suddenly, at this moment, there was another earth-shaking loud noise from the distance of the survivors' base. Then, they heard someone tearing apart among the survivors in the distance. Heartbreaking shouts came, "The zombies are coming in." There will be another update later. Please support Chapter 60. Enemies meet on a narrow road. Chapter 60. Enemies meet on a narrow road. With that heart-rending cry, the entire Ice City prison survivor base once again fell into some kind of panic. The sound didn't spread far, but the panic was spreading at a speed that others could hardly imagine. Spread. Point. Outside the Bingcheng prison survivor base, a certain gap in the wall was completely breached by zombies. However, the zombies did not come over for a long time. The military used tanks and infantry fighting vehicles to form a new wall in the open area. Guns. The sound of cannons was loud and loud. Point. However, the survivors in the first few buildings were rushing towards the back like a wave. Amid the harsh sirens sounded by the military, the people from the Mutual Rescue Association who had been on top also withdrew, and the survivors moved towards the back. The Rescue Association has attracted a large number of survivors, but there are not many people who are truly capable of fighting and assisting the military in combat. Point. After all, now is the early stage of the apocalypse. There are many people who understand that, if the military is defeated, they will also be finished, but not many actually take action. Most of the survivors see others running backwards, and they themselves, so he ran away. If he wanted to deal with the zombies by himself, it would be impossible, unless the zombies came in front of him. Military radio broadcasts are being played throughout the base. All survivors, please evacuate immediately to the west gate exit of Bingcheng prison. Please cooperate with the military dispatch. Do not crowd or trample. Do not conflict. Do not spread panic messages. Bingcheng prison. The city prison is still under the control of our department. Please stay calm and orderly. Yi. Zioki, who was sitting next to Xia Bai, was slightly stunned and said, "Zeman is." Xia Bai pointed in the opposite direction to where they were and said, "That way, towards Jilao, Langjiang province is located at the top of China, and Bingcheng is the provincial capital city and the largest. If the military wants to withdraw to a safe place, the only option is to go south. As a large number of zombies poured in, the military finally planned to abandon this place and retreat. Xia Bai stood up in his truck and squinted his eyes to look into the distance. When he looked back, he saw a dense crowd of heads and vehicles struggling to move forward among the crowd, accompanied by survivors from several buildings in front. With the influx of people, the open area here was instantly filled with people, and when Xia Bai looked forward, he saw that about 5 buildings in front, the military was opening a whole defense line, using rifles to the chariot, served as a shield, and fired fiercely at the zombie horde, which had more heads than the survivors here, blocking them at a certain distance. A thin armed defense line, separated by equally densely packed dead and living people on both sides. The zombies were fearless in their crazy attack, but the escape team of the living survivors was in chaos and struggling. Although most of the zombies rushed to several blown out gaps in the wall, there were still a large number of people in the direction of the west gate. Zombies. It will take time for the military to clear a path. Coupled with this terrible chaos, it is impossible for this team of survivors to really move within a short period of time, and they can only continue to be chaotic and dangerous in the early days of a certain day. Most people were killed by their own panic and confusion. The howls of zombies, the chaotic sounds of humans, and the thunderous sound of artillery were mixed together. This is an extremely frightening scene. The military can't hold on much longer. Xia Bai glanced at the time. There were still more than 2 hours before the battleship upgrade was completed. Although the battleship is not shaking in the palm of his hand, the battleship has not been upgraded yet, and zombies are already approaching. Xia Bai is still a little nervous, but he knows that he is the backbone of the team now. Even if he is a little nervous, can't show it either. Therefore, Xia Bai's expression still looked very normal. And at this moment, he heard a cry suddenly coming from the side of the truck below. "Senior Bailan. Senior Sister Bailan. Help me. Help me." Xia Bai turned around and saw a slightly familiar woman in disheveled clothes squeezed out of the crowd, threw herself in front of Bailan, and screamed. Xia Bai stared at her for a long time before he remembered that this was Xia, the female college student who had deserted them and joined Huang Jingfu at the gas station on the highway out of the city. At this moment, this girl was no longer as high-spirited as when she followed Huang Jingfu. She was in ragged clothes and her face looked pale and malnourished. When she saw Bailan from the crowd, she rushed towards her, as if grasping a life-saving straw. He came over, hugged the astonished Bailan, and cried, "Senior Bailan, I was wrong. I shouldn't have gone to Huang Jingfu. Before she finished her cry, Bailan frowned, threw her arm away with a look of disgust, and planned to walk away. Xia was stunned for a moment, then fell heavily to the ground, crying, "Senior Bailan, please save me. Huang Jingfu and the others didn't treat me as a human being at all. They stripped me naked and tied me to the iron pole. Then, please save me. I ran out during the chaos. If I'm caught." At this moment, Bailan finally paused slightly. She glanced at the girl and said, "Are you an adult too, Yi?" Xia was stunned for a moment, with tears on his face and a little confused. Looking at Bailan in front of him, he thought that his senior sister was going to help him regardless of the past grudges. However, Bailan only looked at her silently and said, "Now that you are an adult, you must learn to pay the price for your wrong choices." After Saying these words, Baylan turned around and planned to walk away. The last time at the gas station, Xia had completely broken the heart of this awakening girl. At this moment, Huang Jingfu also squeezed out of the crowd. He didn't drive, and he was accompanied by several people, carrying large and small bags. He saw Xia here at a glance, and said with a lewd smile, "Oh, our little baby is here, haha, to find her former classmates, but you are so lucky, you didn't even die in an explosion as big as a gas station." They were originally from the third building. With the influx of zombies and the retreat of survivors, it was not surprising that they retreated here. As soon as this guy's voice appeared, Xiao's body trembled violently. After Huang Jingfu glanced at this woman, he looked at Xia Bai's large truck. His eyes narrowed slightly, and he took 2 steps in 3 steps. Book came to the side of the truck and said with a smile, "Haha, is this truck a supply? Ha, is this prepared for me? It's really considerate, boy. This time, I also have a weapon." As he said that, he and the younger brothers behind him took out their pistols, however, as if in response to them. At this moment, Xia Bai, Hao Xiang and others also took out their guns one after another, and on their side, the pistols were only the lowest level, and they had everything from rifles to spray guns. The momentum was amazing, and in terms of firepower he directly crushed Huang Jingfu and his group. Xia Bai stood up on the top of the truck and said with a smile, "Not to mention what happened at the gas station, I still want to ask you, I reported you the last time you lied. How can you still be so lively?" Huang Jingfu's face looked extremely ugly. "I've been waiting for a long time, and I'm sorry for the slow writing with my disabled hand. Congratulations to Ting Han Fengdianlian for becoming the first helmsman of this book. Spread flowers and thank you all for your continued support, and continue to ask for support. I hope you like this, dear book lovers. If you pass by, don't forget to bookmark and vote. I'd like to thank you for herbal tea. Also, there was a time error in the previous chapter, which has been corrected. Chapter 61 The Great Collapse. Chapter 61 The Great Crash. Huang Jingfu gritted his teeth, stared at the trolls and rifles pointing at him, and said, "When I bombed the gas station before, why didn't I blow you all up?" When Xia Bai heard this, his expression froze slightly and he said, "What did you say? Blow up the gas station? Was you the one who bombed the previous gas station?" Huang Jingfu said, "What? Don't you know?" Huang Jingfu looked confused, but he noticed that as he said these words, not only Xia Bai, but also Baylan, Hao Xiang and others, their faces became a little ugly, and they became more vigilant. To be honest, his current mentality is very aggrieved. He thought that meeting Xia Bai today was an opportunity for God to avenge his shame. After all, he had obtained so many Type 92 pistols. If nothing else, he would not be able to deal with Xia Bai and the others. But what he didn't expect was that Xia Bai's weapons had also been upgraded, and they were more powerful than his. Xia Bai gasped. He was still thinking about the explosion at the gas station before. After such a long time, he began to believe that the gas station exploded on its own, but he did not expect that at this time of year, the real owner would show up. Xia Bai still remembered what he thought at that time. Let him know who did it, and he must kill that idiot. When he reported this guy before, he heard the other party talk about this. At that time, he just thought this guy was blowing nonsense. But, was this guy really responsible for the explosion of the gas station? Huang Jingfu, you bastard. Xia Bai was halfway through saying these words with his veins exposed. The survivors approaching from afar suddenly let out a series of exclamations, and the gunfire from the military line not far away suddenly stopped. Xia Bai changed color, instantly raised his head, and looked towards the last line of defense of the military in front. He stood on the top of the large truck, with a wider view, and could see the situation over there. The military's armored vehicle convoy was originally intercepting the zombies in front of them, setting up an impenetrable fire defense line between the 2 buildings, to block the howling zombies rushing over. However, at that moment, from both sides of them, a large number of zombies poured out of the building. Zombies are not things that only attack from the front. As long as they find prey, they will move forward desperately. As long as they can pass the zombies, they will swarm up like a tide. Therefore, they not only rush in from the front, and a large number of zombies poured into the buildings on both sides, directly arriving at the military line without any hindrance, and these zombies would not actively look for exits, and would follow the sound of gunfire to the window, no matter how many. They all rushed down from a high distance, and rushed down from the windows on the roof without fear of death. These zombies fell directly from the second, third and even higher floors, hitting the military's lines like dumplings. Moreover, zombies know no fear, and have no pain to speak of. They only have a desire for fresh flesh and blood. Therefore, if they fall from a building, even if they are bloody, they will immediately pounce on the nearest human being, and fall on the ground. Those behind the military line howled directly, and pounced on the survivors, while some simply landed in the middle of the military line. Even on tanks and infantry fighting vehicles, they directly tore open the bodies of the soldiers who were leaning out to operate the machine guns, and climbed all the way in along the open top compartment of the tank. As the first zombie poured in, the second, the third, they rushed in like moths to the flame. The soldiers didn't even have a chance to close the hatch. The tanks and infantry fighting vehicles instantly turned into zombie vehicles. In a small space with dense zombies, no matter how experienced the warrior is, it is impossible to survive. There were not many zombies that fell down at first, but as time went by, more and more zombies poured into the buildings on both sides. Following the sound of gunfire and the smell of human flesh and blood, they emerged from the building fearlessly. After being killed to death, the military's front was in chaos for a while, and once this front was in chaos, it meant fatal danger. Directly in front of the military's front, the fire suppression of the densely packed zombies finally weakened. They howled and ran, and amidst the increasingly powerless gunfire of the military, they merged into a black torrent that was enough to scare anyone. In an instant, the entire military front was engulfed in it, and a large number of zombies clinging to those armored vehicles. They were like ants wrapped in sugar balls. Only at the moment when those armored vehicles opened fire, they could explode a piece of zombies, but in the blink of an eye they were swallowed up by a denser crowd of zombies. The military troops behind the front line were firing while retreating. However, the heavy firepower had been removed. At this moment, even though these soldiers were still firing randomly, they could no longer stop this terrifying tide of corpses. The scale of this zombie wave was more than 10 times or even hundreds of times that Xia Bai had encountered before at the gas station. At this moment, not only him, but also the survivors here almost heard and saw the swarming terror. The tide of corpses, accompanied by countless overlapping horrifying screams, caused infinite panic to spread in everyone's heart. At the speed at which the zombies were running, it would take less than a minute for them to crash into the similarly densely packed group of survivors. The entire team of survivors is still moving forward like a tortoise. The military troops in front have not yet opened up a lifeline among the zombies in the west gate direction, and the retreat has just begun. Xia Bai couldn't help but tighten the gun in his hand. There are still 79 minutes until the battleship upgrade is completed, but the zombies have already arrived. 79 minutes. How can he ensure that the battleship is upgraded while ensuring survival? Huang Jingfu had already disappeared. Of course, Xia Bai couldn't care about the oily middle-aged man at this moment. Xia Bai knew that the only chance was with the military. They would never let the rear be overrun by zombies. Before the battleship upgrade was completed, Xia Bai had to stay here until the last moment. Panic spread throughout the place, and everyone felt some real despair when looking at the surging tide of corpses. Is it possible to survive in this situation? Some people even knelt directly on the ground, looking desperate. But there are those who have not given up. The remaining resistance forces of the military and armed personnel assisting the survivors in their retreat are rushing forward. Huo Hansheng from the Mutual Rescue Association stood on the roof of an off-road vehicle not far away, holding in his hand a tattered loudspeaker. He hissed, "Brothers, the military has tried its best. Everyone has seen the current situation. Either sit here and wait for death, or pick up weapons and follow our army. Give it a try." Lin Yangan roared among a group of survivors. Survivors in the front row. Retreat, retreat, and at that moment, a series of sharp roars sounded in the field. Xia Bai turned around and saw white tracks cutting through the sky. That was a series of missiles launched from several missile vehicles in the distance. It seems that the score is getting better. Those who like this book, if you pass by, Please bookmark it, vote for recommendation, and support it also. Thank you for the 10,000 reward of the passionate assassin's ruthless sword, and I will continue to add more tonight. Well, a book friend below pointed out 2 errors in this chapter. The time error has been corrected, but the bombing of the gas station was not a bug. It was mentioned when I wrote it before. Although the protagonist heard it, he didn't believe it at all at the time. Thank you for this. A book friend greatly corrected me. Since I couldn't reply normally, I had to reply here. I'm really sorry and thank you all again for your support. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 62. Give me 15 minutes. Chapter 62. Give me 15 minutes. The 3 missiles pulled out a white long trajectory in midair and immediately landed in the middle of the zombie wave in the distance point. The moment it landed, the entire Ice City prison seemed to tremble. Fire shot up into the sky in an instant. The zombies in front were instantly swallowed up. The billowing smoke and flames expanded, and the shockwave swept away the survivors and soldiers in the front row. Rushed in one go. Even Xia Bai, who was standing on the large truck, was overturned and turned upside down on top of the truck. Lin Zhonggan and others ran among the survivors in front and shouted, "Everyone, go back as much as possible. Go back as much as possible." After an interval of about 2 minutes, Xia Bai, who was lying on the large truck, once again saw 3 dazzling tracks crossing the sky. Immediately afterwards, the explosion sounded again, and half of the building over there collapsed in the earth-shattering sound. Smoke and dust billowed in, even engulfing a large number of survivors here, and many people were injured, or even seriously injured. Huge cracks in the ground even spread from the center of the explosion to the bottom of the large truck. Where Xia Bai was, there was darkness between heaven and earth, and the loud noise of the explosion made everyone's ears ring. The space was filled with the pungent smell of gunpowder smoke, and thick smoke billowed from the ground. Missiles are no joke, which is why the military has not used them yet. The missile ended after 2 rounds. The zombies were engulfed in smoke and flames, and the survivors were also in a miserable state, but every survivor seemed extremely excited. The military is re-raising the front line. The scattered soldiers are using the ruins as bunkers. The assumptions are extremely strong in several locations. The armed personnel of the Mutual Rescue Association have also stepped forward to cooperate with the military in building defenses here. And just at this time, the fleeing army of survivors finally began to move slowly. This means that the military's breakthrough in the west gate direction has finally made substantial progress, and the real retreat has really begun at this moment. At this moment, there are still 67 minutes before the battleship upgrade is completed. With 61 minutes left, the thick smoke that shrouded this area finally dissipated slightly, and the ground was filled with huge craters from the explosion and the fleshy remains of zombies. But the new zombies are already stepping onto this scorched earth with staggering steps. The number of zombies gathered outside the Ice City prison exceeds 100,000. A salvo of missiles can only delay time, but it is impossible to intercept these zombies. There were not many zombies that first passed through the scorched earth area. There were only a dozen of them. They were all killed by the military without exception. But soon, a sound like the roar of some giant beast began. There was a sound coming from the end of the smoke that had not yet completely dissipated. The roars of countless zombies coming together to make it. Immediately afterwards, another black torrent appeared in front of everyone's eyes. Endless zombies are roaring towards us at this time. The survivors had already begun to retreat in batches, while the military and the Mutual Rescue Association remained. The military was on the front line of the zombies, while the Mutual Rescue Association was at a later position. Xia Bai even saw Huo Hangsheng in the crowd. He was also in the armed team of the Mutual Rescue Association, holding a gun nervously, preparing to welcome the zombies. Seemingly noticing Xia Bai's gaze, Huo Hangsheng turned his head and rushed towards Xia Bai, gave a friendly smile. At this moment, there are still 50 minutes until the battleship upgrade is completed. At the front, the zombies had already rushed to the danger line. The military was firing while retreating. Coupled with the scattered firepower of the Mutual Rescue Association, it was able to barely temporarily stop these zombies. From the two wings, another group of zombies was attacked. Several groups of military forces that looked very embarrassed came in and became a very powerful force against the zombies at the moment. Those were the troops responsible for the gaps in other walls. At this time, the Ice City prison began to retreat, and they could no longer block the gaps. When necessary, he came here to assist in defense point. However, zombies were so pervasive that they could only intercept the zombies in the front, but they could not stop the zombies that were pouring into the buildings on both sides again. Therefore, they could only watch helplessly as those zombies once again repeatedly used this completely useless method. The tactics were to outflank the survivors from the buildings on both sides. The military is severely short of manpower and cannot take care of this level point. However, at this moment, although the survivors behind retreated slowly, they also vacated the 9 areas closest to the zombies. The rest here were basically soldiers or combatants among the survivors. The zombies rushed down, can barely resist, but as this force is dispersed, the pressure from the frontal military is becoming more and more intense, and the situation is getting worse and worse. With 25 minutes left before the upgrade of the battleship was completed, the soldiers in front had already retreated steadily, and the armed forces of survivors behind were also in a serious situation. There were more zombies. Only Xia Bai's position has become the most powerful firepower point behind the 9.5 buildings at this moment. He, Balan and others have a large number of weapons, which is more than enough to clear out a certain amount of zombies. Many survivors gathered towards Xia Bai's location, and people from the Mutual Rescue Association even came to Xia Bai's side, forming an iron wall in one direction. However, more and more zombies were coming from all directions. Some survivors who fell to the ground turned into zombies and got up. With 20 minutes left before the battleship upgrade was completed, the military in front finally couldn't bear it any longer and began to retreat. At the same time, they notified the Mutual Rescue Association and other survivors to retreat armedly. Many survivors were already terrified and even began to regret staying to help. Now that they had received the news of the retreat, they followed the military and retreated hurriedly. The zombies in front had no way to stop them, so they retreated even more crazily. The situation is not optimistic. Although the retreat of the escape team of survivors is gradually accelerating, once there is a complete ceasefire on their side, the zombies will catch up with the survivors in the shortest possible time. By then, the military in front will not be able to turn back for reinforcement. The remaining survivors will only have the fate of being massacred while escaping, and then evolve into more zombies. Even if they are able to evacuate in the end, more than half of the people in the Ice City prison survivor base will probably die. But with their current firepower, even if they continue to use it up like this, they won't be able to sustain it for much longer. It's better to preserve their vitality and fight while retreating. Maybe they can save more people from the zombies. The moment the military announced their retreat, many survivors had already started running back. However, the soldiers who announced their retreat rarely moved back. Huo Hangsheng seemed to have thought of this and did not retreat immediately. However, the survivors of the Mutual Rescue Association were already frightened. Facing the dense zombies, they involuntarily retreated. Huo Hangsheng had no choice but to retreat with the help of the people from the Mutual Rescue Association. They started to retreat, but then, many survivors discovered that Xia Bai and others in the large truck had not moved an inch, still using the truck as a center, pouring firepower crazily on the surrounding zombies. A strong man named Zhao Chen, who was retreating with Huo Hangsheng, turned his head to look at this scene and murmured, "Those guys, aren't they afraid of death?" Xia Bai did not retreat, and Hao Zhuang and others were also clinging to the side of the truck. Xia Bai had already explained to his comrades that his battleship would be upgraded in 15 minutes, and they must. If they stay here for 15 minutes, not only will they survive, but the firepower carried by the battleship will even be able to block the zombies for a period of time, opening up a way for more survivors to survive. Although Hao Zhuang and others have long been frightened, they have all seen the power of battleships and know that this is the best choice. Their abilities have indeed improved a lot in this month. At this moment, people gathered around shooting together is also extremely powerful. Of course, the military also discovered Xia Bai and others here. Lin Yang'an came directly to Xia Bai's truck and shouted, "Survivors, retreat immediately." Xia Bai shook his head and said, "No, we will not retreat." Lin Yang'an said angrily, "Don't you want to live?" Xia Bai looked at him and said, "Didn't you retreat?" Xia Bai was telling the truth. Although the military had announced a retreat and ordered the mutual rescue groups and other survivor forces to retreat in large numbers, only a few soldiers had actually evacuated. Most of them were still occupying their positions, even if the zombies had already rushed in front of him like a wave, but he still roared and fired to death. The remaining less than 20 soldiers were scattered in every corner of the battlefield, attracting as many zombies as possible and buying time for the survivors. Even if the time these 20 people could buy did not exceed 5 minutes, they are still resisting desperately. Lin Yang'an said, "If you stay here, you can only wait for death. Survivors, listen to me and retreat now. You have no need or obligation to die here." Xia Bai said, "Are you obligated to die here for a group of survivors who are completely strangers and were even scolding you just now?" Lin Yang'an was slightly stunned. He looked at Xia Bai in front of him and seemed to understand something. He gritted his teeth and said, "Thank you." Xia Bai shook his head again and said, "There is no need for you to thank me. I'm also saving myself. Moreover, since you all plan to stay here and fight for your life, I want to ask you for something." Lin Yang'an said, "Huh?" Xia Bai was silent for a moment, gritted his teeth and said, 15 minutes. Can you help me get 15 minutes? Give me 15 minutes. As long as 15 minutes, I will be able to stop these zombies. Please. Collect it. Please vote for recommendation. Asking for all kinds of support. There will be another chapter added later, which may be later. Chapter 63 3rd level battleship. Are those people crazy? Zhao Chen was sitting in the back of a half-carried car, shooting randomly at the zombies around him, while he couldn't help but cast his gaze towards the location they had just evacuated. Over there, the military did not retreat, and neither did a group of survivors. Zhao Chen knew that group of survivors. They were the same group of survivors who had clearly been strongly armed before, but refused the Mutual Rescue Association's invitation to assist the military. However, at this moment, when all the survivors are fleeing, they stand unswervingly with the military, forming the last thin line of defense, blocking the zombies in the center, and becoming an isolated island. It was them who stopped a large number of zombies. At this moment, although there were many zombies with decaying bodies following closely behind the large team of survivors, the number was still within an acceptable range. However, their way of escape at this moment was obtained by those people with their lives over there, in the direction of the big truck, was already surrounded by zombies. Those terrifying creatures with decaying bodies charged at the endangered survivors and soldiers on the isolated island over and over again. Zhao Chen asked himself, even if it was replaced by he himself didn't have the guts to stay there to intercept the zombies. When the military said they would retreat, he even felt secretly happy from the bottom of his heart. But now, Zhao Chen couldn't help but think of what the aunt said before. This strong man also had to admit that the survivor named Xia Bai was the truly amazing person. When they were running around in a swarm, the other party seemed to have thought of the current scene, so he conserved his strength. This moment becomes the survival line for all survivors. However, in the corner, he heard someone whisper, "They are dead." At this moment, this is almost everyone's thought. Being swallowed up by such a dense wave of zombies is absolutely life or death. Zhao Chen spontaneously felt infinite respect. This was the real hero in the apocalypse. If he had the chance, he must apologize to the man named Xia Bai in person for his previous ignorance. I'm afraid, even if he beat Xia Bai to death, he wouldn't have imagined that he would become a hero in the eyes of others while defending this place for the sake of the battleship. It takes time to upgrade battleships, and he did not expect that the Ice City prison survivor base collapsed after not even being able to support it for 2 days. The situation took a turn for the worse, and now it was surrounded by dense zombies. Xia Bai stood on the top of the large truck and looked around. What he saw was a dense influx of zombies. At this moment, Xia Bai even felt as if he had returned to the last day before the end. under the trend of electromagnetic waves of special frequencies caused by alien creatures. After millions of zombies over in the Shengjing survivor base, the remaining survivors surrounded each other in a circle, fighting to the death until the last moment, and never committing suicide. The faces of those familiar to Xia Bai at the end of that day seemed to still be before his eyes. A zombie with half of its body knocked out jumped out from the tide of corpses, grabbed a soldier's ankle, dragged him to the ground with strong brute force, and then opened his mouth. The machine gun mounted on the large truck ran out of bullets, and there was no time to reload. The zombies who found an opening rushed up like a wave. Xia Bai dragged the machine gunner and jumped up from the truck, pried open the door of the truck, and roared directly, boarding. A zombie rushed from the side, and Bailan kicked it over. Immediately afterwards, another zombie rushed out from the corner and bit Bailan's arm, biting it crazily. Lin Zhongan on the other side had just pushed Hao Zuang and others into the car. He turned around and fired at the zombie's head. His head exploded in an instant. Blood spattered and he pulled Bailan into the truck. At that time, he was the last one to get into the car with his few remaining soldiers. These soldiers really tried their best. Even to this point, they still use their bodies to stand in front of Bailan, Hao Zuang and others who were born as ordinary people. Even if Hao Zuang and others also hold guns, in the eyes of these soldiers, they are still the same ordinary survivors who need to be protected. After a bloody battle, almost all the soldiers were killed, but Hao Zuang and the others were still alive and kicking, with at least some minor injuries. This was not because they were lucky, but because those soldiers were protecting ordinary people like them with their lives. When Lin Yongan got in the car, he was surprised when he saw the shining thing in the truck point, but the zombies rushed in almost chasing him. There was no time to be shocked by this now, but he was keenly aware that the key to resisting the zombies, that Xia Bai said, was probably this mysterious luminous body, so he went directly to the store. He stood firm at the entrance of the carriage, turned the muzzle of his gun, and fired wildly, preventing the zombies from advancing even half a step. And Xia Bai didn't take a step back, blocking the entrance of the truck point at this moment. There are still 15 seconds before the upgrade is completed. We must not let zombies rush in. 1 second, 8 seconds. The zombies hit the big truck like a wave. The iron sheets on both sides were even torn open by the zombies with their bloody hands. Like 100 ghosts walking in the night, they stretched out their hands to grab the inside of survivors. 10 seconds. The battleship became brighter and brighter, but its size began to expand. 12 seconds. A zombie rushed into the truck and was shot in the head by Xia Bai in time. 15 seconds. Ding. Dear Captain, your battleship has been upgraded. Your battleship has reached level 3. You have unlocked the 3rd level manufacturing list. The scale of the battleship has been expanded, and your anti-gravity engine has reached the level allowed for low-altitude flight within the atmosphere. Your warship has gained new functions. The second weapon module is online. The medical module is online. The bipolar fuel module is online. The escape drive engine module is online. A new second item manufacturing facility usage point is added. A new electromagnetic energy shield is added. The storage box function of the battleship has been developed. Based on analysis, the system has transferred some of the materials in the battleship to the storage box. Your battleship is now in camouflage mode. Xia Bai had no time to listen to this series of system prompts. They were passing through his mind like a revolving lantern, and he had already seen most of them before upgrading, and he knew clearly that, apart from these superficial features, the 3rd level battleship, the overall function has also been greatly improved. The changes in the outer armor have greatly improved the defense of this warship. It will also have semi-optical invisibility and silence capabilities. Its warship can even be launched into the water, and its built-in environment is more advanced. There is an independent water utilization system and air circulation conversion circulation system, etc. When the battleship reaches the 3rd level, it truly has the scale and functionality of a battleship. The battleship has indeed become huge. It is now almost the size of a minibus. It has even pushed open the dome of the truck, and the front head has crushed the driver's seat of the truck to pieces. From the appearance, this thing is now at this moment. It seemed to have transformed into an existence like a large luxury RV point. However, as a result, the surrounding zombies swarmed in and attacked Xia Bai and others in front of them. Xia Bai greeted directly and led everyone directly to the car. Lin Yangan looked at the large luxury RV and said in surprise, "Is this your only way to stop zombies?" "No, why is your RV so high up, Lin?" Yangan was indeed a little disappointed. He couldn't imagine how a RV could intercept zombies, not to mention stopping those zombies and rescuing more survivors. It is impossible for them to drive such a car and survive in the terrifying zombie wave. However, Xia Bai only smiled slightly, sat directly in the driver's seat, and took a photo in the middle of the steering wheel. Enable the closed safety mode of the 3rd level battleship and remove the camouflage state. Thank you to the book friend passionate assassin for the ruthless sword reward. Thank you for your support. Thank you all for your support. Additional updates have been provided. Please continue to ask for collections and recommendation votes. Dear book lovers who like this book, it is not easy to read a new book, so please support me. Chapter 64 Inside the Battleship. Chapter 64. Inside the battleship, accompanied by a series of metallic transmission sounds full of texture. Under Lin Yangan's unspeakably shocked eyes, this RV underwent tremendous changes in just a short moment. The structure of the entire RV was decomposed in an instant, and then rejoined and reorganized like a transformer. From the extremely thick chassis, a series of steely and cold hull structures emerged. In just a short moment, the entire RV became a huge shuttle-shaped aircraft. Has a cockpit at the front that is suspended in a glass package and is followed by the crew cabin. However, the position of the crew cabin of the 3rd level battleship has changed, but there is no difference. It was extremely luxurious, with only 2 long benches that were transformed from RV beds and sofas, and the light weapons that Xia Bai got from Yang Chengzi were hung on the wall behind. At this moment, this battleship really looks like a battleship. While the battleship has become larger, the crew compartment has become smaller. This is of course because the functional modules of the battleship have increased. The original combat module is in the middle of the entire battleship, while the medical bay, engine module, etc. are all at the tail end of the battleship. As Xia Bai turned on the defense system, all the string windows of the battleship lowered their heavy metal decks, completely isolating the zombies. Then, he pressed a button on the front control screen and pulled up a holographic display showing the external situation. Of course, what you see from the display screen is a hellish zombie's hideous body and arms. At this moment, the entire battleship has been engulfed by the zombie tide. In the distance, in the eyes of the survivors who are getting further and further away from here, Xia Bai and the others have been engulfed by the zombies, and they cannot die anymore. Among the battleships, Xia Bai was also moving quickly. In the system, the captain can read in advance the brief functions and instructions of the battleship form that is 1 level higher than the current level of his own battleship. Therefore, although the battleship has just been upgraded, Xia Bai is very familiar with it. He completed the preliminary defense device and turned around. Into the real Lin Yangan was already a little stunned. He had been a veteran for so many years and had seen a lot of strange things, but was this a transformer? At this moment, he finally couldn't sit still anymore, stopped Xia Bai and said, "What on earth is going on?" Xia Bai exhaled and said, "Welcome to our battleship, Lin." Yangan couldn't help but froze on the spot. In fact, not only Lin Yangan was shocked, but even Hao Zhuang and others who had been notified that the battleship was being upgraded couldn't help but open their mouths in shock when they saw that this was very different from the 2nd level battleship. Xia Bai glanced at him and said, "Captain Lin, I still need your help in contacting the military. Don't let them knock us down because of a misunderstanding, Lin." Yangan nodded and said, Can this stop the tide of corpses?" Xia Bai said, "My firepower is not too strong, but it should be enough to intercept it for a while." When he said this, he paused slightly and said, "Now, it's time for us to do our part, Lin." Yangan felt that he could only nod at this moment, and he said, "Okay, don't worry, leave it to me at the headquarters, thank you." Xia Bai exhaled and walked directly to the back. At this moment, the zombies outside were pouring in densely, as if they were going to engulf the entire battleship. They must take off as soon as possible. Otherwise, even if the battleship is powerful, if there are too many zombies pressing up, a big accident will happen before it can take off. Time is running out, and we must take off as soon as possible. However, he didn't notice until later that Balan had been bitten. There was so much chaos when he finally withdrew that Xia Bai didn't even notice it. At this moment, several girls were surrounding Balan, looking very anxious. Balan's wound was not too big, but it was torn open and bleeding profusely. Xia Bai took a look and breathed a sigh of relief. This wound looked scary, but it was actually worse than a gunshot wound. Balan was an awakened person and had innate immunity to viruses. To her, zombie bites were no different from ordinary bites. What a difference! Balan's face turned a little pale. Although she knew that she was an awakened person and was immune to the virus, she had seen a lot of zombies and infected people. Now that she was bitten for the first time, she was also frightened. But Balan knew exactly what was going on now. Although the battleship was in a fully enclosed state, she could still hear the wails of zombies outside and the sound of zombies pounding on the battleship like rain, so she raised her head directly and said to Xia Bai, "I'm an awakened person. I can't die if I'm immune to the virus, so don't worry about me. You should take action as soon as possible." Xia Bai nodded. This was what he meant at the moment. He said quickly, "That's the medical warehouse over there. Bring the medicines there. There are instructions on the screen that I believe. Yang Xin, please help me. Battleship, the zombies need to be strangled, and the injured people need to have their wounds treated in time. Captain Lin, where is your injured soldier just now?" Lin Jangan over there had just contacted the division headquarters. There seemed to be something wrong with his communication equipment and the signal was intermittent. However, he was still trying his best to pass the news to the division headquarters to prevent them from mistaking Xia Bai and the others for some aliens. The spaceship crashed down, so in response to Xia Bai's words, he just gestured OK to indicate that he understood. Xia Bai had already run to the back of the battleship and called Hao Zhuang and the others over. With their help, he took out barrels of gasoline from the reserve warehouse. Hao Zhuang was sitting there breathing heavily and resting. Seeing this, others came over to help, and then Xia Bai found the engine module. Now the bipolar fuel module has 2 optional fuel tanks, which means it has 2 available energy modes. In the form of a battleship, they are built into the tail of the battleship. One is high energy pure energy, the other is conventional chemical fuel. Of course, Xia Bai, a high energy source, does not have it, and the chemical dye conversion rate of battleships is low. If you want to drive the warship and keep it afloat for a long time, you need large barrels of fuel. Just these barrels of fuel, Xia Bai will I don't know how many gas stations were looted. Although the engines of the 3rd level battleships have been improved, the chemical dyes that are consumed at high speed still need to be replenished in time. Fortunately, because they are battleships, although they are still very rudimentary, the engines and energy compartments are inside the hull and can be used while delivering fuel to the reserve fuel tank while flying. Although this still has a certain risk, it is also something that cannot be helped. There is actually something in the 3rd level craftable list that can replace energy, but that thing cannot be manufactured. So these chemical fuels can only be used temporarily. However, the strength of this battleship is that it can take in no matter whether it is diesel or gasoline, even if it is mixed and added. It is not easy to write a new book. Book lovers who like this book also hope to save it, vote more and support it more. Chapter 65 Prosperous Military Fortune. Chapter 65 Prosperous Martial Fortune. Xia Bai directly grabbed Hao Zhuang, pointed to the spare fuel tank he opened and said, "When the battleship starts to sail, pour fuel into it. You have all seen how much fuel this thing consumes. Now pour fuel into it as hard as you can. Keep the backup mailbox full of oil. Call me when there is the last barrel left. Remember, there must be a surplus. If we fall from the sky, we will definitely fall into the tide of corpses. If there is even a drop of oil, without it, we can only wait to die." Hao Zhuang and others were already exhausted from dealing with zombies before, but now they still nodded and went to move the oil drums with Chen Shai and Cheng and others. Xia Bai said, "Chen Shai and Cheng, what are you doing? Come here." Chen Shai and Cheng ran over in a daze, and Xia Bai directly gave him the permission to drive the battleship through the system, saying, "How to drive the battleship now, and there are some precautions. I told you carefully when I came to you before, no problem." When he heard that the battleship was about to be launched, Chen Qiansheng, who was originally dizzy, suddenly became energetic, but he showed some hesitation and said, "Can I do it this time? No less than the gas station, the big battle just now, the military's rout, and the chaos among the survivors also made Chen Qiansheng tremble in his heart." Xia Bai said, "You are the master of Thunder Fighter. If you can't do it, who can?" He knew that this kind of comfort was more useful than anything else in this situation. Nothing can go wrong with a battleship pilot. Chen Qiansheng gritted his teeth and said, "Leave it to me." How? Zhuang seemed to have noticed his roommate's nervousness and hesitation, and shouted from behind, "Damn it, it's unreasonable. We are doing coolies here, and you, Chen Qiansheng, actually went to drive a battleship. If you don't want me to drive you." Chen Qiansheng scolded, "Fart, you can't even drive a car. Do you want to kill everyone?" Xia Bai patted his shoulder and said in a deep voice, "Get ready to take off." Chen Qiansheng nodded fiercely, and Li Jinggyang behind him shouted at the top of his lungs, "Prosperous martial arts." With that said, Xia Bai had already arrived at the weapon operation module. He directly slapped the wall on one side, raised a seat in the middle of the battleship, sat on Xia Bai, and directly issued the liftoff command as the captain. Over there, Chen Qiansheng responded immediately, and the battleship roared in an instant and slowly rose into the sky. System prompt: your battleship has been started, and the entire system is currently in good condition. System prompt: the anti-gravity engine has been started. System prompt: you are in flight status. System prompt: your current flight altitude 10 meters, 0.20 meters. At the same moment, Xia Bai also directly activated his weapon operating platform. Centered on his position, a circular area with a diameter of 2 meters rose directly, extended from the top of the battleship, and became an independent space above the battleship. Battle Fortress. Then, the black armor walls around Xia Bai lit up one by one, and the holographic display directly provided Xia Bai with a 360-degree all-round viewing angle. At this moment, as the battleship takes off, the zombies clinging to the battleship are falling like dumplings, while above the ground, the torrent of zombies is advancing rapidly. Everything Xia Bai could see were densely packed zombies clinging to the battleship. Xia Bai first checked the status of the number 2 weapon module. Xia Bai had known that the 3rd level battleship would add a weapon module, but he originally thought it was just another cannon, one on each side, symmetrical. But now Xia Bai glanced at it, but was surprised. What kind of machine gun is this number 2 weapon module? This is a 100mm caliber naval gun. At this moment, the number 2 weapon module was not in an extended state, so it was not highlighted on the battleship's appearance. However, Xia Bai was confused for a moment, because he had not prepared such a shell at all. He quickly glanced at it. In the 3rd level manufacturing list, although missiles were still unable to be manufactured, there were weapons matching this kind of naval gun. As the battleship reached the 3rd level, a large number of intermediate weapons could be unlocked and manufactured. This naval gun is bound to greatly increase the combat capability of the entire warship, but it is not used at the moment. He opened fire rapidly, using the cannon that could turn 360 degrees to take the lead in clearing out the large number of zombies clinging to the top of the battleship, clearing the final obstacle for the battleship to take off. Then, he took a deep breath and stood on one side. Pressing a series of buttons on the operating screen, his operating position changed again. He descended vertically from the top of the battleship. Amidst the heavy sound of the metal transmission, he directly changed his position and came directly below the battleship. Under his feet was a dense and endless zombies. The external cannon also moved through the external sliding rail and came under the battleship in order to launch an attack on the zombies below. In the battleship, Hao Zhuang and others were filling the tank in a hurry. Lin Yang'an ended the communication and came to help immediately. Chen Qiansheng, who was in the driver's seat in front, was holding the operating lever in his hand tightly, and his palms were full of energy. It was Khan who watched with fear as the battleship's fuel level plummeted and rebounded in an instant, while he slowly took off with the entire spacecraft point under their feet. Zombies were surging intensely like a black and bloody sea, with wailing and loud sounds. Farther away, survivors fled in panic, and the military's frontline array was trying to survive in the ice city. A lifeline was torn apart from the tide of corpses outside the base point. Xia Bai took a deep breath and glanced at the dense zombies at his feet. When the battleship was stable, he directly pressed a scarlet button on the side of the firepower lever. In an instant, a Thunder 8 missile roared out and hit it directly. In the crowd of zombies, an earth-shaking explosion occurred in an instant point. If Yang Chengzi were still here, he would finally know how Xia Bai would use the missiles he bought. Point at this moment, Xia Bai's battleship opened fire with all its strength in the sky, and with the fierce firing of the machine guns, a blank bloody storm was set off in the very dense tide of corpses. Xia Bai's already stretched energy point soared like a rocket. Not only does he want to intercept these zombies, but he also wants to use his superiority and powerful firepower to grab energy points. On the other side, as the battleship slowly rose into the sky from the center of the zombie swarm, the surging zombie tide was briefly stopped, as if it had hit a giant reef. On the other side, the last batch was the survivors and members of the Mutual Rescue Association who were the most fiercely pursued by the zombies. Watched the battleship take off in horror. However, when they realized that the battleship was firing at the zombies, and the people in the battleship were probably the same batch of people from before, when the soldiers and survivors were trapped in the tide of corpses, the horror instantly turned into ecstasy. Please collect it. Please vote for recommendation. Asking for all kinds of support. Chapter 66, Full Fire. Chapter 66. Full fire. The warship is rising into the sky, and the huge roar, when the anti-gravity engine is started, is gradually weakening as it lifts off. The panoramic view, provided by the holographic 360-degree combat operation room, is too real. If not for the joystick tightly held in the hand, Xia Bai would even think that he was sitting in the sky due to the cold touch point under combat conditions. The operation room is physically isolated from the external battleship. Of course, he can hear the sounds from outside, and even the voices from the battleship pilot point. As soon as the battleship took off, Xia Bai launched a Thunder 8 missile. It was actually an air-to-air missile, but at this moment, facing the dense zombies, it had astonishing lethality. Zombies were also made of flesh and blood. But this was the first time in Xia Bai's life that he fired a real missile. The battleship's control lever was light and too simple. The missile roared out with a long tail flame. The distance of more than 100 meters in the sky was too big for this missile. In the blink of an eye, the missile drew a diagonal trajectory in mid-air, hitting the corpse wave on the right, and even affected the prison building on one side. With an earth-shattering loud noise, the small building's half of the face was forcibly opened, but the billowing smoke was swallowed up in the blink of an eye by the rising fire. The fire was then obscured by the more violently rising black smoke. The explosion also affected a car on the other side that had already been destroyed. The zombies wrapped themselves in Ant-Qiu's infantry tank, which also exploded. Suddenly, the front of Xia Bai's screen was filled with smoke and dust. The surging tide of terrifying corpses was cleared away, and a gap briefly appeared. The battleship is still rising slightly, but it has basically maintained at the current height. Xia Bai had discussed this with Chen Shai and Cheng earlier. This must take into account the energy consumption of the battleship and Xia Bai's second-rate firepower. The shooting ability of the hand must also consider the surrounding environment. Although this height is still at a dangerous height, and zombies will jump on the battleship from the buildings on both sides from time to time, it is theoretically the best attack in this environment. Angle point. There were no shells for the naval gun, so Xia Bai honestly let the second weapon module rest. He clicked a few buttons on the control panel on one side to enhance the stability of his console. During this period, Xia Bai turned his head and glanced. From his angle, from the holographic screen, he could see the survivors behind him, like a black torrent heading outside the survivor base, and further away, in the black and iron curtain-like tide of zombies outside the Ice City prison survivor base, large amounts of flames were rising, which were the heavy weapon strikes that exploded among the zombies the helicopter originally used to evacuate important personnel in. Advance has already turned back, and is ensuring the safety of both sides along the survivors' route out of the base. pouring firepower wildly on the ground. Xia Bai even saw a helicopter, and the zombies built a shocking zombie bridge from the building on the other side. They tore it out of the sky and crashed into the sky. In an instant, the building on the side turned into a large ball of fire blooming in the cold sky. There are screams everywhere, roars everywhere, gunfire everywhere, explosions everywhere. Xia Bai had seen such a scene more than once. At that time, he was even one of those people who fled in a hurry. Not only did he have to worry about zombies, but he also had to worry about whether he would be pushed to death, run over by a car, or killed by a car, killed by a stray bullet, and killed by the explosion. He poured out firepower crazily in midair. From a distance, at this moment, the battleship's cannon seemed to be breathing fire, firing thunderously from the sky. The light was dazzling, and the gunfire even overwhelmed the zombies on the ground. Draw with the lessons learned from the previous helicopter. Xia Bai's cannon not only fired at the zombies on the ground, but also fired at the buildings on both sides at the same time. The 30mm cannon was like a giant hammer, attacking the zombies. Sweeping through it, there was a bloody storm. Smoke, dust, and blood rain rose from the ground. When blowing over the buildings on both sides, smoke and dust billowed, and the entire wall was easily blasted out. Big hole coming. The battleship's cannon can move at almost all angles, and is very light and sensitive in the process of turning the muzzle, without any sluggishness. Xia Bai, who was in the combat compartment, felt nothing except when he just launched the Thunder 8. When it comes to the tremors on the front line, when the cannon fires, there is no sense of turmoil at all. Therefore, in the battleship, Xia Bai could completely let go and fire to deal with human zombies. As long as they have a certain amount of air superiority, it is relatively safe. Xia Bai only needs to be careful that no zombies pull them down from the buildings on both sides. Of course, even if the zombies build a human bridge and come over, they may not be able to pull them down. Xia Bai's battleship was torn from the sky. Although his battleship consumes a lot of fuel, the power provided by the anti-gravity engine is also extremely powerful, and the upgraded 3rd level outer armor is not like these ordinary zombies. It can be easily defeated in such a short period of time. At this moment, if you look at it from a distance, their warships are running across the sky, pouring out firepower like crazy. With their own strength, they can temporarily block this terrifying tide of corpses, but they are farther away. There are still dense zombies swarming in like an ocean. Xia Bai has two main purposes for intercepting zombies here. First, the zombies here are so dense, which is an excellent opportunity for him to harvest energy points. Shooting them down one by one, even if the zombies are not easy to kill, there is still a lot of energy. Click to enter the account. And secondly, Xia Bai really wants to open a lifeline here. The military is obviously overwhelmed at the moment. If no one buys time here, the zombie tide will directly defeat the survivors from behind. Under the impact of such a zombie tide, the current formation of the entire Ice City survivor base will be destroyed. If they were overwhelmed, at least half of the military and the survivors here would die, or even be completely defeated. Xia Bai's battleship was able to survive until now thanks to the efforts of the military and the Mutual Rescue Association. He admitted that some of the survivors were people like Huang Jingfu or even worse than Huang Jingfu, but there were also good people. He didn't feel like he was being patted on the back. What good will it do to you to sit back and watch the largest survivor force in Langjiang province be defeated here? That's not called rationality, that's called a bastard. Moreover, now that Xia Bai is firing here, he can grab a lot of energy points for himself, which is even comparable to his efforts in the previous month. Dear book lovers, please collect it. Please vote for recommendation. Asking for all kinds of support. Chapter 67 The Fleeing Army. Chuking felt that he was extremely unlucky. He was chased by zombies all over the Ice City. He finally arrived at the Ice City prison survivor base, but he didn't stay there for long. Such an impregnable base was destroyed. The survivors throughout the base began their great escape. What was even more unfortunate was that when the helicopter was torn down by the zombies, Chuking happened to be under the helicopter at that time. Chuking was being squeezed into the crowd and running forward in confusion. He only heard a loud noise, and a helicopter that was originally hovering in the sky and pouring firepower on the corpse wave crashed into a building on the side. Chuking trembled with fright and stood still. Someone bumped into her and continued to run forward. When Chuking raised her head, she saw a rotor flying out of the earth-shattering explosion, flying at high speed in the sky. It rotated like a huge rotating guillotine falling from the sky, cutting into the torrent of survivors below, sharply splitting the flesh and blood of every unlucky ghost encountered along the waypoint. It was like a cart full of plasma being thrown away. In an instant, Chuking's eyes were filled with the color of blood. If she hadn't been so frightened that she just stood there and ran half a step forward, she would have been the one who turned into plasma and scattered it all over the sky. Chuking's face turned pale. But in fact, the position she is in is actually relatively safe. She was neither in the second half nor the first half of the fleeing torrent of survivors being chased by zombies. She was squeezed into the middle of the crowded fleeing crowd. But in Chuking's opinion, her condition was terrible. She was surrounded by people. The little junior high school student who fled here from the ice city with her did not know where she was. Here, people were next to each other, and people were crowded together. A moment ago, there was someone. The bad guy touched her chest hard and brought her down to the ground. But the next moment, a good guy pulled Chuking up in the chaos, who was about to fall down and be trampled to death. But in the blink of an eye, as the crowd surged, these people disappeared. Chuking was surrounded by a group of new faces, and some people even rumbled through the crowd in their cars except for a few meters away, and a small patch of sky above his head. Chuking could see nothing. She didn't know if the zombies had caught up, or if the military in front was still fighting, or if the retreat line had been opened. In the chaos around her, she couldn't even hear her own voice. The only thing that could overpower the shouts of the crowd in this corner was the louder explosion. Every time there was an earth-shattering explosion, Chuking's heart trembled, but he also felt calm, because an explosion meant that there were still people fighting, and the military had not given up on them. Although Chuking had also scolded the soldiers before, when the military was evacuating useful people and was angry that they did not protect the people unswervingly like on TV, but now, she is truly grateful to these people. They may have evacuated a group of people, but they really did not abandon them, reload and re-people. Without the support of the military, the tens of thousands of people here would have been swallowed up by the tide of corpses. The fleeing team was moving forward. In the chaos, Chuking heard someone shouting from behind that the zombies were coming. She ran forward quickly and rushed forward again. During this period, she almost fell down several times, but because the person was so strong, she rushed forward. It was too dense to fall down at all, but it saved her life. In this case, if you fall to the ground, you may never have a chance to stand up again. Chuking also found a person to block the wind very cleverly. That was a fat man weighing more than 200 kilograms. He was like a wall in the crowd. He was covered in sweat, but he ran as fast as he could. Following him, Chuking felt much more relaxed. But at this moment, another theory came from behind the panicked crowd, and the shouting crowd came all the way. There are aliens coming from behind. Immediately afterwards, someone shouted that the alien spacecraft had taken off. The crowded survivors were shocked again, but good news came from the front. The military seemed to have opened a small exit. The torrent of survivors that was moving slowly like a snail finally accelerated its movement, and this the sound of the aliens are coming was like a reminder that everyone moved forward in more confusion. At this time, as the overall forward speed of the survivor team increased, the roll of the car was reflected. Although compared with the past, it still drives at a snail's speed, but it has become an escape weapon, and it is also fought over by people. Everyone knows that if you really run out of the base, you must have a car to really escape from the zombies. Otherwise, the zombies in the apocalypse can run as fast as Bolt. How can any survivor outrun the zombies on just 2 legs? At this time, people from the mutual rescue group stood up and organized the survivors to get on the car in an orderly manner, even clinging to the roof of the car. In the chaos, there was a lot of order, but it is said that the mutual rescue group, the senior members of the team, were at the back of the fleeing team because they had resisted zombies before. Therefore, at first, these people could do very little. It was not until later that many other survivors also stood up, and the situation gradually improved. The chaotic situation, it was only at this moment that the crowd showed a little less chaos. Chuking was also squeezing toward the nearest mutual rescue car, trying hard to survive. From her position, she couldn't see any aliens or spaceships behind her, but she couldn't see them either. Relationship, as long as the aliens didn't kill her, she would have to work hard to run forward. However, at this moment, another shout came from behind the huge wave of survivors. This time the shout was more shocking and exciting than the previous cry of aliens coming over like a wave. Someone is shouting, that's not an alien, that's human. Someone stop the zombies immediately. Afterwards, Chuking heard an earth-shattering loud noise from behind. She turned around and glanced back. She was in the middle of a crowded crowd, but she still couldn't see what was going on behind her. However, she was also overcome by the ecstasy of saving her life. Encouraged by the atmosphere, she became ecstatic and ran forward as hard as she could. When she finally reached the mutual rescue car, she heard someone in the crowd behind her calling her. When she turned her head, she saw that it was the junior high school student who was caught in the crowd and was very panicked. Chuking gritted his teeth, hesitated for a moment, then turned around, jumped into the crowd again, struggled to the side of the junior high school student, grabbed his hand, and said, "Idiot. Where did you go? Such a guy won't survive for more than a few days in the apocalypse." She pulled the junior high school student and rushed to the mutual rescue car over there again. At this moment, the speed of the escape team of survivors increased again, and gaps began to appear between the survivors in front and behind. Chuking even watched the mutual rescue car drive forward for a long distance. Ahead, the military successfully opened a waypoint. Dear book lovers, please collect, recommend and support me. Thank you for herbal tea. Chapter 68, Extraordinary Survivor. Chapter 68, An Extraordinary Survivor. At the same time, outside the west gate exit of Bingcheng prison, in the center of the military force, the division commander Xia Bai on the tactical command vehicle was staring closely at a display screen in front of him. Rising up was a black aircraft the size of a minibus, full of metallic sci-fi feel. About a minute ago, the spacecraft slowly lifted off from the completely collapsed rear line of survivors and the dense crowd of zombies. It started with a Thunder 8 airborne missile, forcing everyone to face up to this sudden appearance. A behemoth on the battlefield between humans and zombies. Just half a minute ago, Xia Bai received a message from the company commander Lin Yangan, claiming that this aircraft belonged to a certain survivor and had extremely strong combat capabilities. It would take the initiative to intercept the tide of corpses behind the survivors and provide the whole city retreated to by precious time. If it is in an open area, the firepower of such an aircraft is obviously not enough, but it is not difficult for this aircraft to intercept the tide of corpses coming from the building, as long as it has sufficient firepower and air control capabilities. However, this was the first time that Xia Bai saw this kind of aircraft that seemed to only appear in science fiction movies. He couldn't imagine that this thing belonged to a certain group of survivors and had even been hidden in the Ice City prison. But its appearance will inevitably reduce the pressure on Xia Bai's armor division and allow more survivors to survive. Xia Bai looked at the warship in the picture that looked like a next generation spaceship pouring out firepower crazily, and he always had a dreamy and unreal feeling. At this time, his adjutant said, "Old Lee, is this really something that survivors can tinker with? Or is this actually the ultimate weapon developed by some secret department?" Lee. Xia Bai shook his head. "I know all about the projects here in Bingcheng. I have never heard of anyone developing such a large aircraft. And according to Xiaolin, those who hold this thing are probably a group of survivors." His adjutant said in disbelief, "How is it possible? A group of ordinary people can't even do this. Is not an ordinary survivor." Xia Bai looked thoughtful and said, "Do you remember the 4 Thunder series missiles that leaked out from Xiao Yang before?" "Xiao Yang? Are you talking about Yang Cheng's he? The one from Commander Yang's house?" The lieutenant said. "He is selling supplies and weapons to the survivors. Isn't that what you mean? You want to take this opportunity to recover a batch of supplies and sell the excess weapons to the survivors." The equipment was thus handed over to the survivors and armed. "But when did he get out the missiles?" Lee. Xia Bai said, that kid, although he said he was helping us, he also secretly got a lot of things for himself, and secretly got a lot of things from outside. His father is very well connected in the army. Some of the little tricks he did, I don't even know. When the armament officer reported to me yesterday, he said that 4 Thunder raids were missing. Now it seems that he brought them to the owner of that aircraft. The adjutant said, what do you mean? If the person in that aircraft is really a member of a large organization or a secret military project, will he not even be able to get missiles? Xia Bai looked at the dark warship that was pouring out firepower crazily in the picture, and said slowly, Lin Yangan is right. This is a group of ordinary people, but by no means ordinary survivors. Speaking of this, Xia Bai shook his head and said, but it's their fault, otherwise the zombies from behind would come up, and I don't know how many survivors in this city would have died in vain at the hands of the zombies. A group of ordinary people are now doing what we should be doing. The adjutant hesitated a little and said, then what should we do, Lee? Xia Bai said, no matter what the origin of this aircraft is, the people inside are all humans, and they are also helping humans. Inform all departments not to fire on it, and if necessary, we can even provide them with appropriate help. As for this group of people, let's wait until we get out of here alive. What's the origin of this aircraft? And what's going on with the abnormal behavioral patterns of zombies sent by the biology department? Also, I want to speak directly to the pilot on that aircraft, Lee. Xia Bai's wish could not be realized, because at this moment, everyone in Xia Bai's battleship was busy making porridge. Lin Jiangan and other remaining soldiers and Hao Zuan continued to manually refuel the battleship, which was consuming extremely fast fuel. Yang Xin and other women moved a large number of 30mm caliber bullets from the storage warehouse to ensure that Xia Bai's cannon would not misfire. The situation at Bailan's side had stabilized. At the moment, the medical warehouse was used as a ray soldier treated the bite, and Shen Xianqing and Xia Bai were even more busy. The battleship did not open the communication channel to the outside world, so Li Jianbei could only contact Lin Yangan through a simple communication device. But Lin Yangan had gone to help a long time ago, and lost all the equipment. On the side, where is the communication from the command center? Therefore, Li Jianbei was left alone. At this moment, Xia Bai, who was in the combat module, had a wider field of vision than Shen Xianqing, who was driving the battleship. Through the 360-degree holographic screen, he could grasp the dynamics of the entire field and fire stably. Under Chen Xianqing's control, the battleship finally remained at a height of about 100 meters. The position here was not high, but it was enough to overlook the dense group of zombies. The third-level battleship has 2 missile bays, both located on both sides of the bottom of the battleship, while the cannon is located at the front of the battleship. He didn't have many missiles, but he had a lot of 30mm caliber bullets needed for the cannon, all of which he got from Yang Chengxi. The large caliber bullets swept through the dense group of zombies with astonishing power like cannons. The ground was instantly covered in flesh and blood and severed limbs were thrown all over the sky. The battleship's cannon fired at an extremely fast rate. As it swept forward, a line of zombies turned into scattered corpses and blood on the ground. However, there were still some lucky zombies who did not die in the field, dragging their crippled shells all over the place, crawling among the corpses and blood. The warship was also retreating in the direction of the survivors. The military had opened a channel in the direction of the west exit. The survivors were pouring out like a flood, gradually opening up a larger gap with the tide of corpses behind them. Within a short distance, Xia Bai's battleship followed closely behind them, traveling between buildings, shooting at the zombie waves, while retreating steadily. Although there is still chaos in the field, the situation has actually become stable and controllable at this moment, and the situation is heading towards the human side. Please collect it. Please vote for recommendation. It's not easy to write a new book. For those who like this book, I hope you can add it to your favorites. Vote for recommendation, and support me. If you are too lazy to log in, please log in, and add it to your collection, and add it to your bookshelf. Thank you for herbal tea. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 69 Where is my gun? Chapter 69 Where is my gun? The battleship's cannon spit out bright flames, and the bullets formed a bright beam of light in midair, plowing through the ground like a sweep, leaving a zombie vacuum belt on the ground, and the survivors cheered. Xiao Chen from the Mutual Rescue Association stood on the half section where he was, looking up at the huge shadow cast by the battleship in the sky, and opened his mouth and shouted fuck. However, at this moment, he heard on the other side, among a group of survivors, someone shouted heartbreakingly, aliens. That's an alien battleship. When Xiao Chen turned his head, he saw a greasy middle-aged man with a fat head squatting on a jetter, pointing at the battleship in the sky, shouting in horror with his eyes split open. The greasy middle-aged man shouted at the top of his lungs, that's an alien. Let's run. I've seen a similar style of alien spacecraft at a gas station before. This one is bigger than that one. It's the flagship. We must hurry up and contact the military to knock it down. A survivor with a pockmarked face squatting next to the fat man stared at him for a long time with squinting eyes. Finally, he spat and slapped the middle-aged fat man on the back of the head. Didn't the fat man react in time? I was almost knocked off the jetter by this slap. Then the survivor with a pockmarked face cursed, you have a club in your head. If it is really an alien spaceship, how can it help us fight zombies? Moreover, you have seen it, and the military still uses you contact. If this is really some kind of alien, wouldn't the military have cut him off earlier? The middle-aged greasy fat man suddenly changed his color. He reached for his waist and pulled it out. He said in shock, where is my gun? Where is my gun? Who took advantage of the chaos and took my gun away? If Xia Bai were here, he would have recognized him long ago. This person was Huang Jingfu, who just took advantage of the chaos and escaped from under his nose. The strong man had a look of disdain on his face, glanced at Huang Jingfu, and said, you are still running for your life, so what are you pretending to be? Let me see. This is definitely the ultimate weapon of the military. If the situation collapses, come out and save him now. Field. Damn, this guy didn't know what kind of brain circuit he had. He thought about it for a long time, and the more he thought about it, the more he thought it was possible. Huang Jingfu didn't find the gun, and his companions didn't know where they were. He looked at the figure of the tattooed man, and although he still looked unhappy, he could only hold on to the edge of the car and swallowed his anger with a depressed look. But Xia Bai couldn't notice the situation here at the moment. He was the only firepower point in the battleship. He was pouring firepower crazily on the ground in midair. He strangled zombies to death on the spot, and his energy point was also from this. There was a rapid increase. The speed at which he used battleships to harvest zombies was more than 10 times faster than when he went out to hunt zombies alone before. It's just like mowing the lawn with Peerless. Of course, this is also related to the density of zombies here. The powerful firepower of Xia Bai's battleship briefly intercepted the zombies here, although there were still some that slipped through the net and crossed Xia Bai's fire blockade. There were not many. The survivors who had already fallen into despair finally found a glimmer of hope. He was full of vitality and rushed forward with all his strength. Chen Xianqing was indeed very talented in driving. He had only heard Xia Bai's verbal description before, but now he could still drive the third-level battleship smoothly once he got started, ensuring that Xia Bai's side could fire stably. As he fired, Xia Bai's energy points were rising at an unprecedented speed. A dense wave of zombies of this size, with a 30mm caliber bullet, could directly knock over several zombies, even if some were not hit the head. But where is the power of the cannon? When it fires down, at least 20 energy points are recorded. Xia Bai was addicted to killing. For him and the battleship, a dense wave of zombies of this scale was simply a gift of energy points. Get rich overnight. Just look at today. Xia Bai cut back and shot at the zombies while following the survivors to retreat. The military had already opened up the situation in the direction of the west gate exit and began a real retreat. The survivors were retreating faster and faster, and those with cars were retreating faster and faster. Those without cars were running away desperately, while Xia Bai was walking through the sky behind the large group of survivors, leaving a trail of bloody terror on the ground. However, there were too many zombies and they were too dense. After a large block, the people behind them surged up crazily, stepping on the corpses and even zombies that were not fully dead, and continued to charge forward. At this moment, their warship was slowly sailing out from between the buildings in the direction of the west gate exit, like a giant whale swimming in the sky. Only when he got here did Xia Bai realize that the retreat mode chosen by the military was to retreat in groups. The military's helicopters were also in the sky, maintaining absolute air suppression, and on the ground, the remaining members of the division where the troops were dispersed into more than a dozen escape routes. They each led a group of survivors along these escape routes to divert the tide of zombies outside. Looking from Xia Bai's position, he could see that not far away, on the ground outside the west gate exit, a dense and vast group of zombies were launching a crazy attack on the living people in this direction. The military's heavy firepower opened fire along the entire line, clearing large areas of open space in an instant. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the survivors, led by the formations that the military had already arranged, attacked from all directions. Breaking out, the torrent of survivors and the military was diverted here. Under the cover and suppression of heavy firepower, they broke out in various ways and diverted the zombie hordes. The lifeline has been opened by the military, but there is still chaos among the survivors. There are even a lot of zombies mixed among the survivors. Some people simply act on the calls of others, and some people simply rush in blindly. But there are also some people who steadily follow the military team, rushing all the way out, trying to break out of this land of death. At this time, except for the military personnel who were steadily executing orders and plans, most people were confused. The deafening sound of gunfire was no joke. Plus, there were zombies everywhere. Even if they were rational and calm people in such an environment, if they encounter someone who is panicking and shouting around, they will panic every minute and they will run after anyone who shouts loudly. Some people even drive cars and follow others. He rushed out for 100 or 10 meters in confusion, thinking that he was following people from the military. When everyone around him was eaten by zombies, he realized that he was not following someone from the military. At this moment, everyone was running for their lives and had no time to worry about themselves. Not many people paid attention to the Xia Bai battleship. Please bookmark, recommend, vote and support. Please collect it. Please collect it. Please collect it. Chapter 70 The Tilting Battleship. In this chaos, the members of the Mutual Rescue Association were also one of the most active groups on the battlefield. Huo Hansheng stood up without fear of death and took his armed men everywhere to save people and help the military as much as possible in this chaotic time. Stable survivors and save more people. In the apocalypse, two types of people are easy to gather around. One type is a ruthless survival master, and the other type is people like Huo Hansheng. Xia Bai's battleship is also slowly moving out. His purpose of intercepting the zombies has almost been completed here, but he is still firing fiercely. Such a dense group of corpses are all energy points. When their warship came over, it almost collided with an armed helicopter circling back. Through the holographic screen, Xia Bai could clearly see that the fireman inside was unable to fire his gun at the moment. He turned his head in stunned silence and looked at the huge creature so close, with an expression as if he had seen a ghost. Although this group of sub-soldiers received an order from above, saying that the identity of this aircraft had been verified to be a friendly fighter plane, everyone was a little confused when looking at such a thing. Whose aircraft was this? Is it from the military? Which dimension did it come from? Xia Bai also gave him a very non-standard military salute, but he soon realized that his combat platform was externally observed through a holographic screen, and he could not be seen from the outside at all. As a result, Xia Bai could only retract his hand angrily, and the helicopter passed by the battleship. Xia Bai aimed his gun at the zombies outside the west gate exit. He actually wanted to find some intelligent zombies. After the Bingcheng prison was breached, although there were many zombies rushing into the base, the traces of their actions being guided were significantly reduced. However, the tide of zombies outside was unusually ferocious. Xia Bai guessed that the number of intelligent zombies should not be large, and that guy should be greedy for life and afraid of death. He doesn't dare to enter the chaotic Ice City prison. He should be outside. Xia Bai turned the gun at this moment, just to deal with the zombie. However, there was also chaos outside. There were like a tide of zombies. Although their position was not high, it was impossible to find a unique one among this tide of zombies. The zombies are coming point however. At this moment, his battleship suddenly sank slightly, and the system alarm sounded instantly. Warning, low fuel. The voices of Hao Zhuang and others came from outside. There are only 2 barrels left. At this moment, there were zombies and survivors below Xia Bai. It would not be fun to fall down. Xia Bai connected the communication with the pilot and said quickly, continue to raise the altitude. Our goal has been achieved. Let's just take the empty road, drive out of this area, and avoid the zombie swarm. However, at this moment, Xia Bai's peripheral vision suddenly saw a dark shadow suddenly jump out of the holographic screen on the right point. It was an extreme mutant that took advantage of the fall of the battleship to leap high from a building on the other side. In an instant, it shot up like a cannonball and slammed into the outer wall of the battleship. Xia Bai's gun was rushing out. When he turned around quickly, the monster had already hit hard and landed directly on the top floor of the battleship. Then there was a howling and a terrifying scraping sound. That monster is tearing at the outer armor of the battleship. This extreme mutant was larger than the one Xia Bai had seen before, and its power was even more amazing. The entire battleship even tilted slightly, and an alarm sounded instantly from the top armor. The destructive power of extreme mutants is astonishing, far greater than that of ordinary zombies, so we must get rid of it as soon as possible. Xia Bai took a deep breath and directly ordered, activate the electromagnetic energy shield of the battleship. The electromagnetic energy shield is turned on. The moment the electromagnetic shield was turned on, Xia Bai saw through the holographic screen that the extreme mutant was blown away from the battleship through the sky point. However, at that moment, the battleship suddenly tilted again. Warning, low fuel. Warning, energy is exhausted. It is recommended to replace the energy supply with high efficiency energy to power the warship. The electromagnetic energy shield has been closed. As the battleship tilted, Xia Bai opened fire wildly. The monster hit the ground heavily and started running wildly on the ground amid the tide of corpses. Xia Bai let out an angry roar. Amidst the heavy firing of the cannon and the tilt of the battleship, he turned the fort crazily. During the extreme rotation of the cannon, a series of harsh friction sounds were emitted. However, in such a rapid turn of the gun, despite the situation, the bullets from the machine gun still caught up with the monster's running body from behind. The 30mm caliber bullet tore apart the opponent's thighs, muscles, and body, forcing it to stop. Then, it completely beat the monster into a blooming flower of flesh and blood on the ground. The battleship was still falling diagonally. Immediately afterwards, Hao Zhuang's voice came from the communication. Boss, I don't know what happened just now. The barrel of oil that just went down, the oil in the backup fuel tank and the main fuel tank were all lost at once. It's over. We are down to the last bucket. Xia Bai knew the reason for this. He had just activated the electromagnetic energy shield for about 5 seconds. But this is not burning fuel. Someone was clearly hiding in the fuel tank and drinking fuel. Xia Bai was shocked. He brought a dozen barrels of gasoline, and all of them were used up in such a short time. His grandma's land. Nearby. Xia Bai shouted, walking all the way from the war room to the cockpit. Looking down from here, he saw densely packed heads on the ground. There were survivors and zombies. The survivors were frantically looking out. They were fleeing, while the zombies were desperately squeezing into the crowd. Survivors, zombies, and soldiers were everywhere. Outside the Ice City prison, there was chaos, with blood and miserable howls everywhere, like a hell on earth. Xia Bai has long been accustomed to such scenes. Once a survivor base is breached, and the survivors break out, they can still prepare themselves in the base, but they really rush into the tide of corpses outside. That is, it's time for everyone to show their talents. Xia Bai originally planned to see if he could find intelligent zombies among the corpses and kill them, but now, regarding the energy issue, this is what I think. For example, if you put it before the end of the world, a battleship is like the protagonist who has one luxury car, but the car is a car and the oil is oil. The car is given to you for free, but for the rest of your life free fuel supply is unlikely. However, this problem will be solved soon. It won't be such a scam, so don't worry. Please collect it, recommend it, vote for it, and provide all kinds of support. Chapter 71. A RV more powerful than an armored vehicle? At this moment, the survivors in the direction of the Ice City prison survivor base had basically withdrawn. Under the leadership of the military, they divided into dozens of escape teams and broke through the zombie swarm from different directions. As a result, the zombie group was divided and there was chaos everywhere. The fastest group was almost breaking out of the zombie wave surrounding the Ice City prison. Several military helicopters were firing in support everywhere, but at this moment, everyone is focused on escaping for their lives and cannot pay attention to these details other than themselves among the battleships. Chen Shai and Cheng also knew that there was not enough fuel. If he maintained the battleship form, when all the fuel was used up, their battleship would turn into an immovable turtle shell. When he heard Xia Bai calling for landing, he hurriedly prepared. Lower the battleship point. When he pressed down the bow of the battleship, he saw densely packed zombies below. Some zombies had even piled up into a mountain of corpses below them, frantically waving their terrifying claws at the thing floating in the sky and making a loud sound. Chen Shai and Cheng had no experience in clearing the way in the zombie swarm, so Xia Bai got him down and sat on the driver's seat of the battleship. He controlled the battleship to make an emergency landing from below, getting out of the way of the terrifying zombie swarm, and rushed to the side. He rushed in the direction of the fleeing group of survivors who were running wildly through them. The moment it landed, Xia Bai turned on the energy-saving camouflage mode, and the battleship instantly turned into a minivan the size of a minivan, like a transformer. However, there were zombies all around, and the survivors had already divided into groups to escape. Noticing this, not much in one scene. As the battleship form was released, Hao Zhuang and others were lying on the ground completely exhausted after the battle with zombies just now and the high intensity temporary refueling. This group of people had indeed reached the level of limit. Xia Bai ran over the zombies and rushed towards a team of survivors led by the military who were quickly breaking through. The RV of the third level battleship is extremely powerful. It starts quickly and accelerates quickly. It collides with zombies all the way. It is almost unstoppable. Looking at its posture, it is simply more powerful than the military's armored vehicles. The situation of the breakout team was not good. Under the protection of several military off-road and infantry fighting vehicles, there were more than 20 vehicles. Some of the vehicles even had people sitting on the roof and trunk, and there were people on both sides. It's zombies attacking these survivors crazily. When Xia Bai drove over in his car at lightning speed, he saw an infantry tank being engulfed by dense zombies. Not even a few of those zombies had complete bodies. Broken arms and legs were considered good, and most of the body was gone, and the organs were dragged out for more than 10 meters, and were even picked up and chewed by other zombies, but they were still desperately crawling towards humans. Only at the top of the infantry fighting vehicle stood a soldier who was firing wildly. His face was full of despair. He saw a huge luxury car here, and it actually rushed over densely packed zombies. It was more powerful than their infantry fighting vehicle. Rushing past their infantry fighting vehicle that was engulfed by zombies, the soldier burst into ecstasy and shouted, "Save me! Save me!" It's a pity that Xia Bai has no intention of asking for trouble. If he stops the car now and slows down, he is definitely looking for death. It was one situation when the battleship was in the air before, but it is another situation now. He wants to rush out all the way. The front windshield of the RV was even covered in blood, and a zombie with only half its head left was even lying on the passenger's side, biting the glass crazily. However, the glass material of the third level battleship is polycarbonate. There is no way a zombie could get into the driver's seat, even if it grinds its teeth. In the blink of an eye, the escape team of survivors appeared in Xia Bai's field of vision. Just as he was about to merge into the convoy, a supercar approached him and knocked him away slightly at the same high speed. And with Xia Bai's high speed advancement, such a small collision almost caused Xia Bai to plunge into a group of zombies. Xia Bai glanced over and saw a young man sitting inside the supercar, mouthing "Go away" to him. This guy might not have seen Xia Bai's previous battleship form. Is Xia Bai someone easy to mess with? He turned the steering wheel directly and hit his head back. The young man in the supercar seemed to have never expected this scene. He hurriedly turned the steering wheel to avoid Xia Bai's collision. However, Xia Bai was already being very unreasonable at this moment. He plunged into the escape convoy of survivors in front. Xia Bai's current plan is to go wherever it is safe. Since the outside of the convoy was full of zombies, he squeezed into the middle of the survivors convoy. Anyway, if he didn't squeeze in others would squeeze in. And he was a battleship, who could possibly squeeze him? Xia Bai forced himself to squeeze out a path, and blended into the escape team of survivors. Among the zombies and survivors, Xia Bai's AV was as powerful as a tank. The young man in the supercar following behind was furious, slapping the steering wheel and yelling curses, but in the chaos, no one could hear his words. However, some people connected Xia Bai's AV with the previous battleship, and shouted at the top of their lungs. However, many people originally ran in front of the fleeing team, and did not even look at the shadow of the battleship. They would not agree and some were shocked. Those who have seen battleships in their time, can hardly associate such a battleship with such an arrogant RV. Therefore, the small group of people who shouted became suspicious themselves, and fell silent. Xia Bai didn't care. The situation was great now. He just wanted to appear at the speed of light and even stay away from the military. The battleship has reached level 3. Although there are still many problems, it has undergone qualitative changes. Coupled with the large number of weapons obtained from Yang Chengxi, it is now truly independent. The convoy was passing through at high speed. Although the military's method of diversion and breakout put everyone under pressure, at the same time, the zombies and threats faced by each side were greatly reduced. Xia Bai squeezed into the center of the convoy. There were survivors on both sides. However, he was completely safe. Xia Bai was finally able to breathe a sigh of relief. At this time, Xia Bai heard a voice beside him saying, "I was saving people just now, but now I'm dead, fellow Taoist, not dead, poor Taoist. Isn't this a bit too low?" That was when Lin Yanggan came over and sat in the passenger seat. His face looked a little pale. Xia Bai glanced at him and said, "It's the same thing. I didn't say I wanted to be the savior. This is the truth." Xia Bai is going to be in a panic right now. The savior is our group of soldiers. It has nothing to do with you. Lin Yanggan exhaled and said, "Are there any more cigarettes? The Chinese one last time was good." Xia Bai groped for a while, took out a pack of Nanjing, threw it to this guy, and said, "Zhanghua is gone. All the equipment I bought is used up, and there are not many people smoking here. In fact, none of Hao Zhuang smokes. Only Xia Bai, a doomsday veteran, has a habit of smoking." Lin Yanggan lit one, took a nice sip, and exhaled. His pale face seemed to be filled with a little blood. It is not easy to write a new book. Dear book lovers who are passing by, don't forget to vote and add it to your favorites. Only with your support can new books thrive. Chapter 72 Smoke. The escape team of survivors is speeding away. They are getting further and further away from the Ice City prison. The zombies around them are gradually decreasing, and they are being left behind. Xia Bai finally breathed out a long breath. He glanced back and saw Hao Zhuang and others behind him. They were lying on their backs on the bed of the RV. The inside of Xia Bai's RV is fully connected. After that, he turned his head and glanced at Lin Yanggan next to him. The soldier held a gun in one hand and a cigarette in the other. In less than 2 minutes, he smoked 3 cigarettes like a drug addict. Xia Bai suddenly said, "Thank you, Lin." Yanggan glanced at him in surprise and said, "Thank you for what?" Xia Bai said, "Without you, we wouldn't all have survived." Xia Bai was telling the truth. In the last 15 minutes, if Lin Yanggan and his soldiers hadn't been at the front, nearly 20 people would have died, and now only 3 people would be dead. Xia Bai and the others, it is impossible to live so completely. Lin Yanggan took a puff of cigarette, shook his head, and said, "What are you thanking for? In peacetime, our local army had nothing to do, but now we have something to do. If we don't get things done, are we really doing nothing? And these two in the base, we have to pick up all kinds of miscellaneous things." Xia Bai glanced at him, smiled, stopped the business exchange, and said, "Don't you realize that you, a group of professionals, are actually at a loss by saving a group of ordinary people with little fighting ability?" Lin Yanggan said, "Weren't you saving people just now?" Xia Bai said, "I'm different from you." Xia Bai shook his head. He did want to help other survivors. Xia Bai happened to be in that position at that time, and he was indeed capable. He knew more clearly how the population would shrink in the future. There was no reason not to take action, and this although Xia Bai spent 1000 energy points to upgrade the battleship. After killing zombies in waves, he still had nearly 1000 energy points in his hand now. He was definitely making a profit, point Lin Yang'an said. But speaking of it, what exactly is your car? Xia Bai smiled and said nothing. Point Lin Yang'an glanced at him and said, let me tell you something I shouldn't say. You should be careful. Although no one is in charge of these things now, and no one can control these things, but after a while, when our divisions gather together, you'd better not come. Otherwise your things will definitely be confiscated by then. Not confiscated, but also handed over to the scientific research department. The battleship is bound to the system and no one can take it away. Point. But Lin Yang'an was telling the truth. The military might allow survivors to hold weapons and equipment, but it was impossible for Xia Bai to hold such a strange warship like this. However, Xia Bai had no plans to join forces with the Bingcheng military. Point. Before he was in Bingcheng prison, he planned to spend the winter with the help of the military. Now that he is out, the military is bringing a large number of survivors. Zombies follow them wherever they go. There may be danger at any time. Xia Bai is in danger again. It's not that I don't have the ability to protect myself, and there's no need to follow the military. Point. However, when Lin Yang'an said this, he really came from Xia Bai's side. Point. Xia Bai said instead, but speaking of which, are you interested in following me? I have enough pipes. Lin Yang'an laughed. Just as he was about to say something, Bailan's voice suddenly came from behind the RV. He is about to die. That was the soldier who Lin Yang'an was seriously injured. Point. Lin Yang'an glanced at Xia Bai and walked toward the back. Point. The soldier was bitten on the cuff by a zombie, and now the disease process has begun. The wound has turned black, and the blood vessels have burst and appear purple black. He is being placed on the bed on the side of the RV. Point. When Lin Yang'an came over, the soldier was holding Bailan's hand tightly and said in a confused voice, sister, throw me down. I can't cause you any trouble. I can't. Bai Lang was also bitten by a zombie, but she was an awakened person and was naturally immune to the zombie virus. The bite alone was not serious. She, Hao Zhuang and others were somewhat silent when surrounded by this warrior. Hao Zhuang said, brother, you have worked hard. Please lie down for a while and rest. The soldier's eyes began to turn a little white. My blood, bed. I will kill the virus. It's okay, just lie down. I can't open the door while I'm driving. You don't have to worry about the bed or anything. This voice came from the driver's seat in front. Xia Bai only said this sentence and continued driving silently. Point. The level of the battleship's medical bay is related to the warship itself. The battleship is now level 3 and the medical bay is also level 3. The level 3 medical bay is actually not low and can even perform medium-sized operations, and its main source of medicine can be through two aspects. On the one hand, ready-made medicines are added internally, and inside the medical warehouse, there is also a manufacturing facility with a single function that can only be used to synthesize medicines. Energy points can be used to manufacture on-site anything that a third-level warship can produce. Drugs, but the third-level battleships are unable to produce drugs to restrain this alien virus, so they are also helpless against the infection. Point. In fact, the third-level battleships have also unlocked many incredible drugs, but the drugs to fight this virus are not special for the battleships and systems. The battleships and systems themselves do not exist to fight viruses, so there is no speciality. Antiviral serum to deal with alien viruses is like the previous extreme virus inhibitor. Its description is that it can fight against most viruses. Therefore, if Xia Bai wants to get this kind of anti-alien virus from the battleship, the drug that affects the virus cannot be specialized. It can only be a broad type of whole virus counter serum. Therefore, the battleship level required to make this thing is slightly higher. Xia Bai estimates that it will be at least level 4. Only at level 5 can we truly create this antiviral serum that will make the entire Earth helpless over there. Lin Yang'an, who had just stood up from the passenger seat, exhaled and said, thank you, Xia Bai shook his head. It should be. Don't worry, there won't be any trouble. Lin Yang'an patted Xia Bai on the shoulder, turned around and walked to the back. He sat down next to the soldier and put his cigarette into the other man's mouth. The soldier recognized Lin Jiangan and said vaguely, "Company commander, are you really so stingy? Now, you are going to give me the rest of your draw." Lin Jiangan pulled out the gun from his waist and latched the safety and loaded it, holding it in his hand, and said, "It's good to have a cigarette for a person who is about to die. How can you lie on such a soft bed, surrounded by living people? If I'm treated like you when I die, I will be able to live with a smile." The soldier really laughed. Yuzaoki ran over from the corner, held his hand, and looked at him silently. The soldier looked at Yuzaoki and showed a pale and miserable smile. "I also have a sister as old as you, but I don't know about it in the Magic City." Xia Bai drove steadily in front. At this time, the group of survivors they were in finally broke out of the zombie group and drove in another direction along another path. According to the military's plan, they would be temporarily dispersed. "Come, wait until you are completely rid of the zombies, then they will gather at the designated location and become a large army again." At this moment, Xia Bai heard a gunshot from behind, followed by Lin Yangan's voice, "Open the door, the body must be disposed of." After waiting for a while, Lin Yangan sat back down again, looked outside with a cigarette in his mouth, and said solemnly, "The ones who died first in other companies were all the company commanders. I just don't have the ability to send all my brothers away first. Let's go. By the way, I won't return that box of Nanjing to you," Xia Bai said. "You can eat and use whatever I have here, local tycoon." Lin Jiangan took a puff of cigarette, looked out the window at a survivor's car and the disgraced people sitting in and outside the car, and cursed. How in the world did his grandma become like this grandson? Dear book lovers, please collect, recommend, vote and support in any way. Chapter 73 Big Star. November 18th. The vast wasteland north of Bingcheng Prison Point. The sky has completely darkened, and it has been nearly 4 hours since they broke out of the Bingcheng prison. The tide of corpses following Xia Bai and his team have been almost out of sight. Zombies ran faster than people, but not as fast as cars. After making several large circles, the zombie tide was finally thrown away. The military's goal was achieved. They divided into several groups and diverted the zombie swarm, making it possible to break out of the encirclement and completely get rid of the zombie tide. Xia Bai's team also slowly stopped here. This was deep in a field, with a small village about a kilometer away. But now everyone obviously felt that uninhabited wasteland was more reliable. These 4 hours of running were a torment for the vast majority of survivors, not only psychologically, but also physically. Some survivors who had their own cars were fine, but some simply sat on the roof of someone else's car. Many people on the car hood and even in the trunk were thrown off in the bumps, and those who were left behind were in extremely miserable condition. Some people's hands and feet were blistered and dripping with blood. However, none of these people showed any signs of pain. On the contrary, they seemed so happy that they survived. On the other hand, for Xia Bai, these 4 hours were a paradise-like life for the people on his battleship. There is everything you need in the RV, and it is very stable. The driver rotates back and forth to eliminate the possibility of fatigue driving. Even if zombies pounce on it, with the armored defense capabilities of the battleship, as long as the number is small, there is no need. Xia Bai even made a bowl of instant noodles to eat. Therefore, when the car stopped, everyone else was in a panic, but Xia Bai and the others were in high spirits. They all came to stretch their muscles when they got off the car. Compared with other survivors, it's as easy as taking a self-driving tour, and the zombies are nothing more than roadside scenery. Just as Xia Bai got out of the car, Lin Yangan also jumped out. Xia Bai glanced at him and said, "What are you doing? Meet up with my own people," Lin Yangan said to the military infantry fighting vehicle at the front. "Besides, there is something wrong with my communication equipment and I can't contact the division headquarters." Xia Bai took a breath and didn't hold back, but suddenly asked, "Do you know where there is a nuclear reactor?" Lin Yangan was stunned for a moment, glanced at the RV behind Xia Bai, realized something, shook his head, and said, I don't know, and I won't tell you if I know, but to be honest, your thing is still fine now. No. Although there was talk of developing small nuclear reactors a few years ago, the current situation is that, unless you find someone to customize it, it is difficult to get a reactor that can be used for your thing. Even if it can be used, how do you install it and use it? Stuff is no joke. Xia Bai smiled and nodded. He just asked about this casually. The military might really have a small reactor that he could use, but it would not be a matter of time to get it. With the strength of his current battleship, if he really has the strength to compete with the military for whatever reactor he wants, or even conduct an equivalent exchange, it is more likely that his warships will be commandeered, which will cause a lot of trouble. Xia Bai is not planning to return now. What the military hopes to avoid is this kind of thing, let alone bringing trouble to itself. Immediately afterwards, Xia Bai took advantage of the situation to remind him of the existence of intelligent zombies. He himself is not in a position to find and hunt intelligent zombies now, but the military may have this ability. Of course, the military people may have thought of it without his reminding, but he still has to say something here. Use Lin Yangon to convey it back to the military department. I understand. Don't worry, I will report it to the superiors when I get back. After saying this, Lin Yangon exhaled, took out another cigarette from the box of ninjing that Xia Bai gave him, lit a cigarette and left. The last remaining recruit in his company, Danzi, carried their remaining equipment and followed him like a little follower. He smiled very flatteringly and said, Company Commander, give me one. Looking at the backs of the two people, Xia Bai fell into his own thoughts. It didn't matter if he couldn't get the nuclear reactor. He didn't have much hope, and as Lin Yangon said, even if he got it, it wouldn't matter. It may not be easy to use, and in the third level manufacturing list, there is something called a secondary energy module. 200 energy points can be used to build one. According to the introduction of the system, this thing is a pure energy source, completely tailored for the bipolar fuel module of the warship. It may be better than chemical fuel. While he was pondering, Lin Yangon was already far away. The military's next plan has not yet been formulated, and Xia Bai decided to leave this group of survivors before joining the military force. He could turn to the Shengjing survivor base, which may not yet be formed, or go to the Zhu River. Go to the city, where Xia Bai stayed for a while. It should be relatively safe, and it might be a good place to hunt zombies and accumulate energy points. In fact, several hydropower stations in Ji province are also good choices, but anyone can think of a place like a hydropower station as a good place. There are many survivors and many zombies. He knows several large hydropower stations in the 3 eastern provinces. The Songhe Lake hydropower station became a refuge for survivors in the early days of the apocalypse, and eventually became a corpse den full of zombies. This is probably the case in most places like this. It is one thing to reopen the power station when it is over. Cleaning up the zombies and the intricate environment inside the power station is a very risky and big trouble. Therefore, it is a good idea for the hydropower station to provide energy for the warship, but it is difficult to put into practice. Xia was confused for a long time, then finally shook his head, stood up straight, and planned to go back and familiarize himself with the various new functions of the battleship, and take a closer look at the battleship's third level manufacturing list to see what he and the battleship could use. However, he just stood up straight when he heard a voice beside him. It was him. He was the one who hit me. Xia Bai was stunned for a moment, then turned to look in the direction of the sound. At first glance, he saw a group of people in black, with 2 young men, a man and a woman, guarding them. Xia Bai looked at these 2 people very clearly. Looks familiar, that young man, the guy who collided with Xia Bai in his supercar before, and that woman is pretty good looking, and she didn't forget to put on makeup even in the apocalypse. Xia Bai frowned and stared at this woman for a long time, and suddenly realized that she seemed to be a popular female star before the end of the world. Her name seemed to be Superhuman. It's been so long that Xia Bai can't remember clearly. If he had seen a star at the end of his previous life, Xia Bai would have been a little excited. Even in the end, he would have been very excited to see a legendary star. But now Xia Bai only frowned slightly, thinking that the star Superhuman was indeed quite good looking. She looked even better in real life than on the screen. She had a good figure, at least a pair of C's to start with, and her butt was, where the hell are you looking? Xia Bai's evil gaze aroused extreme dissatisfaction from the young man. He took half a step forward, lifted up a corner of his coat, and revealed a dark pistol. It comes with half a gun body, full of threats. What? You bump into me, and I bump into you. Are you here to take revenge on me? Although 7 people came from the other side, and except for these 2 young men, the other 5 seemed to be bodyguards, but Xia Bai had nothing to be afraid of. If he couldn't beat him, Balan and the others would be in the car. Just shout and you can come down with a rocket launcher. However, Xia Bai touched his nose in confusion and thought, don't these people know that he is the owner of the battleship? In fact, this group of people really didn't know. After all, Xia Bai's landing point was still some distance away from the survivors. Moreover, there was chaos at that time. Only a few people paid attention to the battleship. Everyone couldn't escape in time, and they couldn't keep watching. Looking at the battleship, even if you have seen Xia Bai's battleship, it is really difficult to connect a flying battleship with the luxury car at this moment. Therefore, these people really didn't know that Xia Bai's V was the black battleship that flew in the sky before. Dear book lovers, it is not easy to write a new book. I hope you will support me. Please collect it, recommend it, vote for it, and ask for all kinds of support. Chapter 74 Buying a Car. Chapter 74 Buying a Car. The female star Xu took a slight step forward, stopped the young man who was a little emotional, nodded politely to Xia Bai, and said, you should know who I am. Just as Xia Bai was about to speak, a very surprised voice suddenly came from behind him. Damn, isn't this Xu Yiman? Xia Bai turned around and saw Hao Zhuang sticking his head out from nowhere, staring at Xu Yiman with bright eyes, and jumped out of the car. Xiansheng, come and see. Big star, real person. Ah, my goddess. Xu Yiman showed just the right commercial smile point. Although Xu Yiman is not as good as those real big stars, she is still a top figure among the second tier. She is the goddess in the hearts of many otakus. Xia Bai, with a dark face, pulled the embarrassed Hao Zhuang back. Of course, in the previous life, he might not be stronger than Hao, but now, he is much more rational. Hao Zhuang blinked his eyes and stood behind Xia Bai, motionless. However, he also had a pair of rogue eyes and glanced randomly at Xu Yiman. The angry young man wanted to scold Xu Yiman, but was stopped by Xu Yiman again. Yiman stopped. Xia Bai glanced at Hao Zhuang and found that a tall, honest and upright guy like Hao Zhuang was so filthy that he was even scarier than a real filthy man. Xu Yiman smiled appropriately and said, in addition to the identity you know, I'm also a member of Xu's Pharmaceuticals. Xia Bai was originally wondering how this star could bring such a group of bodyguards with no resources or strength. At this time of year, it was more likely that such a star would be pinned to the ground, but the other party was a large consortium. People are different. Xia Bai thought for a while and said, so, what are your plans? I heard from Xiaofan that you guys bumped into each other just now. You may not know that his car was modified and made of special materials. I didn't expect that your car hit him and ran him over among the zombies. I came over, but there was almost no damage, so. Xu Yiman smiled and seemed very polite. I want to buy your car. Xia Bai, Xu Yiman said, don't worry, our bid will be fair. We will give you the Desert King we have, and then give you a box of compressed biscuits. Believe me, no one will bid higher than us. The woman looked at Xia Bai in front of her with a smile on her face, looking confident. She seemed to feel that she had offered a price that Xia Bai could not refuse. Xia Bai shook his head and said, no, if you want to buy a car, find someone else. Right. Xu Yiman was stunned for a moment, chuckled, and said, in this case, I will give you 2 more boxes of compressed biscuits and a box of mixed vitamins. Isn't this price enough? Xia Bai still shook his head and said, I'm sorry, I really don't want to sell my car. Xu Yiman was stunned for a moment, but the young man became slightly annoyed. He said, you bumped into me, and I haven't caused any trouble for you yet. Don't be so shameless. Xu Yiman did not say anything this time, nor did he stop the young man. Xia Bai smiled and said, I'll give you 3 boxes of compressed biscuits, and I want you to cut off one of your hands. Do you think it's appropriate, Xu? Yeeman said, we don't mean that. We just want to buy your car. We will also give up one of our cars to you. This transaction is very fair. I know that your car may be valuable before the end. But now, I think 3 boxes of compressed biscuits will be more useful to you. The young man lifted up his clothes again and said, boy, my sister is here to be polite. Don't wait for me to be rude to you. Ah. These 2 people, one a good person and the other a bad person. Xia Bai said, I'm sorry, I really don't like your compressed biscuits. If you want to be rude to me, then let's see which one of us is more rude. At this time, Chen Shai and Sheng's voice sounded in the RV. What's going on? What star? With that said, the guy ran out of the RV and his eyes widened when he saw Zhu Yiman. However, at this time, Hao Zuang, who had been very excited just now, pulled Chen Shai and Sheng and shook his head at his room. At point Chen Shai and Sheng were slightly stunned. Bailan, who was following Chen Shai and Sheng and stuck her head out, looked at this scene and seemed to understand something. She smiled and said to Xia Bai, the eggs are fried and the rice is almost ready. After finishing the things at hand, come back quickly and finish your meal. After saying that, the awakened girl smiled very decently and turned back. She didn't put on makeup, but her smile was surprisingly gentle and stunning. Point Xia Bai smiled and said, I'm sorry, we are about to eat. Would you please come back? If you want to eat too, it's simple. Just bring a few bottles of vitamins and I'll treat you to it. The young man's face turned red when he heard this, and he was about to have a seizure, but Zhu Yiman stopped him, shook his head and said, well, excuse me, if you want to sell the car, you can come to me at any time. Xia Bai said, you can come to me anytime if you want to eat fried eggs. I also have beef here. Zhu Yiman did not answer anymore, but left directly with the angry young man and others. Xia Bai smiled. He knew that it was impossible for this group of people to do something here because of such a trivial matter. That would be sheer madness. At that moment, he went back to the car directly. Point they actually don't have many eggs, and this is their last meal. However, if Xia Bai wants to, he can also make them directly from the battleship. With the upgrade, the 3rd level battleship has 2 manufacturing facilities, which means that Xia Bai can make all kinds of things with 2 threads under Xia Bai's influence. Bailan and others also began to pay attention to eating in the apocalypse. Now that they were completely safe, the first thing to do was dinner. Nowadays, RVs also have recommended kitchen facilities, so you can cook. Point at this moment, Xia Bai's RV battleship was completely formed, and it had truly been achieved. It could transform into a battleship when it advanced, and kill people to escape. When it retreated, it could transform into an RV, a mobile luxury hotel. Point after drinking and eating, Xia Bai finally had the opportunity to sit down and study the current situation of the battleship. Point of course, the first thing he looked at was the battleship's 3rd level manufacturing list. As the battleship was upgraded to the 3rd level, the basic items that the battleship could manufacture increased greatly. Chemical fuels also cost 1 energy point per barrel. In terms of medicine, many high-end medicines were added. This can help Xia Bai maximize the role of the medical warehouse. In addition, there are some black technology products produced exclusively by the system. Point of course, what Xia Bai is more concerned about is the primary energy source, which has 200 energy points each, but it is a pure energy structure. For battleships, it is a ready-made energy source. It may not be as durable as nuclear energy, but this thing naturally becomes Xia Bai's the most cost-effective battleship power available. Point and another thing that Xia Bai is very concerned about is secondary bioenhancing injection. Please collect it. Please vote for recommendation. Asking for all kinds of support. Chapter 75 Xia Bai's Farm Development Plan. Chapter 75 Xia Bai's Farm Development Plan. Secondary Bioenhanced Injection. Introduction. This item can improve the user's strength, explosive power, speed, and reaction ability in a short period of time, allowing people to have stronger physical fitness than ordinary people. However, there will be side effects after use. Depending on the user's physique, there may be symptoms. Symptoms such as dizziness, nausea, and prolonged fatigue may occur, and the resistance will be significantly weakened within a certain period of time. Energy points required to create this item: 50 points. This thing, one injection will turn you into an awakened person. Xia Bai couldn't help but take a slight breath. However, there seemed to be a lot of side effects. The price was not expensive, so Xia Bai still planned to come up with this thing. It might be able to save lives at critical moments, and it seemed to be much more useful than inhibitors, and beyond that, there are a lot of weird things. Powerful electromagnetic dog collars. Xia Bai originally thought it was some kind of powerful item with a messy name, but it turned out to be a dog collar with powerful functions. Looking at the introduction, it seemed that it could connect a person's brainwaves with a dog, and the person could communicate something. After a few simple commands, the human and the dog become one in a true sense, and their minds are connected. Looking at this thing, Xia Bai couldn't help but feel a little depressed. If this thing was before the end of the world, he would probably be able to make a lot of money from it. But now, is he going to control the zombie dog? Although Xia Bai has not encountered many zombie animals along the way, in the apocalypse, animals are more likely to mutate than humans. Humans are still aware of the threat of zombies, but animals are not clear about it. Sometimes they are not even infected. Knowing how you were infected, it is very dangerous. It is not that easy to find someone who has not turned into a zombie. Xia Bai thought to himself, could it be that the system wants me to use this thing to play I'm Legend? However, Xia Bai soon discovered that as the battleships were upgraded to level 3, there were many such seemingly useless items. The level of black technology involved every corner of life. Xia Bai looked around and realizing that this system allowed him to enrich and improve the internal conditions and systems of the battleship. It's a pity that Xia Bai doesn't have that many energy points in his hands now. Even if there are many things that are indeed very practical for battleships, for the time being, these things are of little significance for survival in the doomsday. However, there are other things. Something attracted Xia Bai's attention. Concentrated solar generator. Introduction. This item is a low-end model. The generator and solar panel are connected to each other. The area of the solar panel is 1 square meter. Depending on the intensity of sunlight and other external conditions, the amount of sunlight per hour ranges from about 2 degrees to 5 degrees. Energy points required for item manufacturing. 300 points. This thing really made Xia Bai's eyes light up. In Xia Bai's opinion, this is like an artifact. On Earth, the current power of monocrystalline silicon solar panels on the market in a day is only a few tenths of a degree to 1 degree, and this one can only produce 2 to 5 degrees per square meter. At the end of the day, at least 10 kilowatt hours of electricity can be generated. 1 kilowatt hour of electricity allows a 1000 watt electrical appliance to work for 1 hour and a 25 watt light bulb to light up for 40 hours. Although this thing is in the system, it's just a low-end model in the description, but on Earth, this is absolutely incredible. If he could get one of these things, the electrical system of his AV would be unsolvable, and if he could get 5 or 6 of these things, Xia Bai estimated that the power it generated was even enough to provide the electromagnetic shield function of the battleship. In this way, it could be regarded as a disguised solution to Xia Bai's dilemma of whether the shield could be turned on or not. However, this thing has another advantage. Since it can generate electricity from solar energy, it can also convert electrical energy into energy points. Although this conversion efficiency is extremely low, if it succeeds, this will be Xia Bai's first truly stable safe way to collect energy points. Therefore, although this thing is expensive, it is quite valuable. Suddenly, Xia Bai found that he had too many things to build. Xia Bai counted it all around, and he found to his dismay that the nearly 1000 energy points he seemed to have in his hands were not enough to use. Upgrading a battleship from level 3 to level 4 requires a full 10,000 energy points, which is an astronomical number for Xia Bai. Therefore, Xia Bai is not in a hurry to upgrade. Instead of being in a hurry to upgrade the battleship, he might as well stabilize the current situation and improve the battleship's endurance and long-term combat capabilities. Xia Bai thought about all this mess. He first controlled the item manufacturing facility, entered the content, and produced a primary energy body, a solar cell, and a strengthening potion. Moreover, the functions of the 3rd level battleship were in a mess, except for the new module functions. There are other battleship system functions that are useful or temporarily unavailable, such as the airtight cabin oxygen conversion system, which can continuously provide oxygen to a completely sealed battleship. These are all prepared for space navigation. Of course, these functions are not completely useless at the moment, and it is not known that these functions may have miraculous effects under certain circumstances. No matter what, development comes first, and seizing the time to settle down and follow the great strategic line of sustainable development is the most correct plan point at this moment. Xia Bai spotted Balan, who had just come back from outside. He immediately sat up and asked, "How is it? Did you buy the gasoline?" During that time, Balan and the others went to buy fuel point. However, Balan shook his head and said, "No, those survivors didn't have much fuel in their hands, and they almost didn't carry extra. They basically had as much fuel as they had left in the car's mailbox, and they all knew it. Next we have to drive away. This thing is as valuable as food. No matter what price we pay, no one is willing to sell it." Xia Bai was not too nervous. The primary energy body was already being built. Once this thing was built, oil would not be a critical issue. Balan said. However, the military said that we should all go there. It seems that they want to gather us survivors together and want to say something. Xia Bai nodded thoughtfully. "We don't all need to go there, so I'll ask our senior sister Bai to accompany me." Although he thought it was unlikely, Xia Bai still wanted to be on guard against what the military might think of his warships. Of course, with the little strength left of the army here now, even if he wanted to do no matter what, it's impossible to do anything to Xia Bai and the others. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.